Good afternoon and welcome. Today's webinar will be undertaken by Nababkak Nihes.
Thank you, Tawtak Horemheb. Welcome everybody to our Wu-Sabat Outformation classes UK. This is Reflection and Projection Part 2. I am a student teacher of the Master Teacher, Dr. Malachi Z Dr.York Okran, and my name is Nababkak Nihes, as you just heard my colleague and brother introduce. So say part 1 is available on the YouTube channel if you're not able to have seen that, and Reflection and Projection is available at the UNW book room and various different All Eyes on Egypt stores across the world. So welcome to those who are joining us on the Zoom platform, and also to those who are joining us live on Facebook. This is part 2. We've got a lot to cover in today's class, so please, by all means, take notes. This is a class, so take notes. Go away, do your research, etc. So it's something that you know, not something that you hear us say and that you believe. Yes, and then you're part of the learning process. Understood? You are not part of, as I say, hear or sound nice reasoning. This is dealing with sound right reasoning, confirmation, and say hopefully you will. Hopefully you will learn something today. I'm sure that you have never heard before. This is new information from us as an organization. So this is All Eyes on Egypt, Midlands and North, presenting this class to you today. And we're going to do a short introduction. So obviously if you're joining us for the first time today, what I would suggest is that you just go back to any one of our videos, part 1 of one of those videos on our YouTube channel, to get a fuller introduction. Because it's part 2 today and we're a little bit tight for time, I'm going to be going straight into the subjects that cover part 2 with a brief overview of what we did in part 1. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in who we are as an organization, so on and so forth. So if you need that, or you're here for the first time, then by all means, please do that research and check that information out to know who we are, who's speaking, what the doctrine is that we're dealing with, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so let's move through. So what I just want to do just for the moment is right, just want to do a quick poll. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to launch this poll, and all you need to do is answer yes or no. So it's just to check whether you can hear my voice clearly and hear my voice clearly over the background tones. So I'm launching that now. For those of you on the webinar, if you just want to vote yes or no, just to confirm that you can hear me okay, or if you cannot hear me okay, then no. Okay, I'll just let that run up to 50 seconds and then we'll end that poll. So thank you for that contribution there. So for those of you who voted, obviously got 100% yeses, no no's. So let's move on. And then we're just going to do a vision check. So just check in. Can you see the screen okay? And if I move the back and forth. Is that just moving okay for you? Excellent, much appreciated. I don't know why it closed there. Must be my mouse. Okay, right. Okay, moving on to get into today's session. Right. So just to do a nice positive opening. So this is about positive thinking, not designed to scare anybody. It's a reflection of our culture as Musbatu or Sabaeans. And so prayer, meditation, proper diet, drinking enough water. Yeah, all these are forms of positive thinking. So as part of our culture, we're just going to start class. Because anything we do, we want to invoke our esoteric as well as our etheric. We're obviously delivering it to you exoterically, but we want to invoke our esoteric power as well to hope this class goes well and the information that you receive is conveyed as accurately as possible. So you can do that by way of Pa Takyud. I'm going to say in the Sabaic language and then translate for everybody's perfect understanding in English. Abdoi kale namazurat wu fakur ama kasam afaf empa faut anuki jawef pa ashuk empa faut wu kale ashuk kawun jawef neya anuki kasam empa faut wu pa faut kawun kasam emneya anuki wahu ama pa faut wu pa faut kawun wahu ame neya nakuk kadur na jo ame kasam empa faut wu khabub ame mushahus nakuk kadur kawan kale pafef nakuk dayur jawef pa faut ame wase ame dayarni kawun lakei bakoe jawef pa faut anuki abed bi nafashni pa faut kawun anuki pa faut kadur nakuk kadur pa faut amul nakuk amul. And just for English translation, so we began by saying, begin all prayers and thinking as a part of the all. I am in the divine love of the all expanding, and all divine love is in me. I am part of the all expanding, and the all expanding is a part of me. I am one as the all expanding, and the all expanding is one as me. I can succeed as part of the all expanding and fail as an individual person. I can be all that I want in the all expanding, as long as my want is to stay in the all expanding. I am never by myself. The all expanding is, I am. The all expanding can, I can. The all expanding does, I do. So that was Pa Takyud, as I say, one of the affirmations from our culture. We have prayers, chants, and various other spiritual aerobics necessary, which we'll touch upon a little bit, I think, today, why it's necessary, as we are, say, both physical and spiritual or etheric beings simultaneously. So if you're just joining us for the first time today, we just do a quick webinar induction for the class. So if you have any messages, basically they are not questions. If you use the chat, so you've got your three sort of options there: chat, raise hand, and then Q&A. And so select panelists and all participants. That this basically means that what you're saying will appear to everybody, and so therefore you won't get duplicate comments if there's a duplicate issue that's been raised there. So any technical problems, things of that nature, you can just put that in the chat. If you want to acknowledge or answer questions that I may be asking generally and give some feedback, then please, or any feedback that you want to give, then place that in the chat. If you have a question, there's two ways to ask questions. So one of those ways is to raise your hand. And so if you raise your hand, basically to ask a question to myself, you will see a note appear on your screen asking you to unmute yourself, and then one of the say facilitators will unmute you, and then you will go live and be able to ask your question and interact with me verbally. If you've dialed in, the same facility, *9 to raise your hand, *9 to lower your hand, *6 to mute your phone, and then *6 to unmute your phone when, as I say, you're able to then speak. And here you can do a written question and answers. If you're not as confident or whatever to come on verbally, then you can provide a written question, and one of the facilitators will read out that question at the appropriate time. Obviously, if you're live to Facebook, then you won't be able to interact in that particular way at this particular time. So obviously we encourage people to register so you can join us live in the Zoom platform. Maybe what we'll do for the next class, obviously if there is, maybe put a moderator or facilitator in that section, and then they can obviously pass on any questions that are in that chat as well over to me in the Zoom platform, so at least I can pick those up as well. Okay, so that's induction. So we just did a poll, and so there may be some poll questions during the class. Today, probably not as many as we usually do, because we've got so much to cover. So pay attention. It's just to make sure that you're recapping what we're talking about, and that you just to ensure that you're learning, or if we need to, something's not clear, that we obviously can adjust and make corrections. So pay attention. Anything that's not covered in today's class, pay attention, because in 2 weeks' time, there'll be some poll questions on this class. So make sure you're taking notes and paying attention accordingly. Right, okay, so let's get into what we need to talk about today. Just bear with me. Should mute my phone when I do that. Don't want to hear me gulping down water. So, who is the master teacher? Well, Dr. Malachi Z York born in Takoradi, Ghana, June 26, 1945, to Mary Abba Akran York. So we call him the master teacher. And why is he called the master teacher? Well, he's called a master teacher because he's a master at teaching, and certainly has demonstrated since 1963, unofficially 1970, officially, that he has the necessary outformation coming to us in the form of information to solve the problems that have been plaguing ourselves as the Nagaru or Negroid people in this day and time. Yeah, a necessary cure, I suppose, for the spell that we have been under, certainly in the last 6,000 years, and more acutely in the last 400 years, when our people were savagely kidnapped from their homeland in Afafre Ka'a, or Africa, and then brought into the Western Hemisphere. Understood, but world over, our people, even though we are the majority, are not respected as a people on this planet, and have been subject to, let's say, horrific acts to simply remove us from existence. But that's not been possible. And so in this day and time, help was necessary, and I'll go on to talk about that a little bit more. So a culmination in a long line of teachers that have come along to raise our intellect, to transform us from mortals back into deities again. Now, in order to facilitate his arrival on this planet, he had to be born through the womb of a woman. And so this is important when we're talking about teachers, leaders, etc., that we acknowledge the importance and role of the sacred feminine and their role in birthing great leaders into this world as the pathway that in the monotheistic religions was taken away from them. Understood? The matrix, and if you look up that word matrix, which means womb, became a patrix, yeah, patriarchal. So they made their god a he. And if you look at the Bible in particular, and you look at the first book of the Bible, Genesis, yeah, which the so-called Jews call the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, all of the women's names have been removed. So did their God not know if that children are born through the womb of a woman? So why does it say Noah begat, and this person begat, and this man begat, and this man begat? Did God not know the rules of nature? And that's not to offend anybody's sensibilities here, but somebody sought to remove the woman from his story. Yeah, you know, the Greeks and the Romans had a little sugar in their shoe. You understand? So when we're dealing with this, we have to acknowledge that we are a matriarchal society, and we've always been matriarchal. Obviously, influenced by foreign invaders has meant that we've become matriarchal. So it's important that we acknowledge when we're looking at, say, various people, male, female, who have contributed to the world, that we look at their genealogy and who gave birth to them, because if it wasn't for their mother and father, they wouldn't be here. So this is Mary Abra Akran York, and she transitioned excuse me, transition is now one of our Muslafu or Salafu ancestors in Sabaic as Mary Abra Akran York. As you can see, a very beautiful picture of her there in her ancestral form. Yeah, as wearing the crown also of the clan mother, understood, at that time. So his father was Al-Habdi Abdur Rahman Al-Mahdi, again another significant individual out of the royal family out of Sudan, a direct descendant of Mustafa Muhammad Al-Mahdi of the Sudan. Unfortunately, he was assassinated in 1970. But again, this union of these two individuals of significant bloodlines gave birth to, or allowed the birth of the master teacher, and to house a being that enabled our ancestors to be able to speak through in this day and time, as is our way. It's not their way, but as is our way, to allow us to say incarnated whole light beings or souls to convey the necessary information that we need in this day and time to facilitate our ascension pathway, as is natural for all beings within nature who are natural nature beings. Understood? The planet has an ascension pathway. The sun has an ascension pathway. We, as human beings, have an ascension pathway. If we choose to align ourselves with the natural tones in nature, understood, and accept that we are responsible for, or have a duty to fulfill our potential, understood, as they teach you in the Masonic schools, that you come to improve yourself. This is something that came out of the schools, mystery schools in ancient Egypt. We're here to improve ourselves, achieve perfection. People say no one's perfect. Well, that may be the case, no one's perfect. However, we are seeking here to achieve a state of perfection. You understand? That's why we're born, to fulfill our potential. Some may do that in one lifetime, some may take multiple lifetimes to achieve that. This is our genetic right, understood? And so it was necessary, as I say, given the conditions that our people found ourselves in this day and time, and the help that we cried out for, that we needed new information in this day and time. Yeah. Again, I don't want to talk about the Mahdi too much. I spoke about him in previous classes, so please refer to the introduction and to get more information on Mustafa Muhammad Al-Mahdi, born 1845 and then crossed over 1885. So Isa Al-Hadi Al-Mahdi, and that was his name at age 25, when he claims or states that he was initiated at the junction of the two Niles, the blue and the white Nile, and was housed by a being by the name of, or they call Yaanuwn, understood. And this is the combination of the physical being and the esoteric side is how, as I say, every 24,000 years, our story must be renewed. So they say 1 year for 1 land mile, because the circumference of the planet is 24,896 miles in circumference, expands and contracts, so sometimes goes up to around about 902 miles in circumference, as we as human beings put on a little weight and we reduce weight as women through their monthly cycle change shape, obviously monthly, and then revert back to shape. So this is organic, what happens in terms of the planet. But the number 24 is significant in our culture, and it comes up a number of different times pertaining to not only our design but our solar system, which is sometimes referred to as Project 20, Sector 24, and the planet referred to as Zone 6. Yeah, so you count all the planets from the outer part of the solar system inwards, then planet Earth becomes the 6th planet in, as opposed to the Mukas or the Caucasians who counted the other way around, where they say 3rd rock from the sun. Understood. So this is the symbol of Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, or the Master Yaanuwn, in the Safaf. Yeah, so that is the Sabaic word, or the proper way to say in tones, what the Greeks call hieroglyphs. Understood. And we've gone through these many times before, so for the purposes of speed and efficiency, please refer to the other classes if you want to know the meaning of the various different symbols that you see in front of you. So again, I'm not going to go to this into too much detail. Suffice to say that we've gone through various different schools, taking a long walk, on a short path. And that means that the incarnated master, who generally speaking, those incarnated masters are given an hour. So symbolic, you see the 24 hours rounded up for that period. It's not 24 hours in a day, it's 24 hours in a period of singular revolution of the planet around its own axis, or spinning on its own axis. And it actually takes 23 hours, 56 minutes and 6 seconds, or thereabouts. And so rounded up to 24, you see that 24 hours. And symbolically speaking, in the renewal of our story, each of the elders is symbolically given an hour, understood, to convey certain information that aids, say, in the renewal of our story, or upgrading, our intellect, obviously, on the planet as human beings. And so from 1970 was the incoming of the sun cycle. That officially was the time for false things to perish and the truth to start to be revealed. So many of the so-called symbolism in what had been conveyed in the religious schools was, as I say, being uncovered, or walking us back home to ancient Africa, understood, and that pyramid building culture, yes, and the giving back of our spiritual science. All different races out there have their own spiritual science. It enables them to unify mentally, and then the physical unity then is able to follow. So we were lacking that spiritual science within everybody else's religion, playing second-class citizen, worshipping deities that don't look like us, and then we wonder why we're spiritually inept or spiritually weak in this day and time, and seem to be cannon fodder or scapegoats for other races' misdeeds and evils. So this is because one of the characteristics of this spell, which we're going to talk about in a second, in the Right Knowledge series, was discussed as spiritual ignorance and racial blindness. Spiritual ignorance is because we do not know, or had lack of information, proper information about how the universe works, how it connects into the dual verse, triverse, into multiverses, into the omniverse. How do the rules of nature work? You learn a few of those things in science. As for every action, there's a reaction and various other things. But what do these rules work? What are the rules about race? How does it connect with the animal kingdom? What happens when you take somebody else's life, for example? Certain rules kick in, as opposed to the various different man-made laws that we're subject to. understand? And then the cultural laws that we're subject to in this society, yeah, a lot of which oftentimes makes no sense. We did a whole class, a couple of classes, just about the breath. How in this day and time we don't even know how to breathe properly. Yeah, mouth breathing is bestiality, as far as was considered that by our ancestors. Yeah, beast if you breathe, take down air straight into the body, human body, without it going through the proper filtration system, which is the pyramid, the original pyramid, which is our nose. Now, suffice to say, 1970, that first half an hour was us mastering those lesser mysteries or the religious degrees. And still today, people are discussing the Bible, and some various certain media personality got into trouble this week, it seems, for discussing matters which had, say, a biblical context to them. Now, whether you agree with what was said or not said, the issue is that we're still messing about in the fiction, understood? And so we have to stay factual in this day and time. The new spirituality is factual information. If it's, I'm not saying to say that they're not going to come for you if you're speaking facts. That's how it is. They do it anyway. But stay on facts, understood? Not on this fairy tale religion. The Bible, Quran, the Torah, now in 2020 have proven themselves to be nothing but myth and legend. And they were not around when the first people were around. The Sands people, who are in South Africa, who we all descend from, all human beings descend from on the planet, and more specifically ourselves, as the original hominids who ever lived without the waters, understood. They haven't got any concept or ancient concept of what you call the Bible, Quran, so on and so forth, that human beings on the planet Earth are killing each other from. But yet, none of those religions can stop coronavirus 19. Churches are closed, mosques are closed, synagogues are closed. So how long are our people going to keep believing in these myths and enduring pain and getting our neck lent on by knees of the same people or the same gods of these people who look like the very people inflicting all of this pain and suffering? When are we going to get it? And how many teachers have to die for that message to be conveyed, for us to wake up? I could say that a bit differently, and to have the proper impact. So you see on the left-hand side, many, a long line, who have suffered to get this message out to our people and continue to suffer. Yeah, master teachers doing 135 years for bringing us the facts. They don't care nothing about, let's say, what we're doing morally or physically or whatever the case may be. They just don't want you to get the necessary information to transform you back into supreme beings again. Understood? Yeah, when you understand the science of religion, not the practice of it, the science of religion, then you know why they play so much emphasis on keeping us suppressed, because we are a battery for their system to keep going. Now, the first 30 years, say first half an hour, that was the income and the sun cycle. The second half an hour they refer to as the hereafter in our doctrine. Hereafter the devil's rule ended. So the Mukasu, or the Caucasian race, was given a 6,000 year rulership timeline in the last moon cycle or silver cycle by their overlords, placed in their genes, in something called their telomerase, understood? And that basically gave them an expiry time, so they talk about in their Bible, yeah, in his story, where they were given dominion over the planet, understood, according to their overlords. Doesn't mean they were given dominion over us. They just, their overlords gave them dominion over the planet, like their God likes to do, take land from people who already live there. Understand? So after that rule ended, when the 9th of September 1999, coming into the year 2000, that was the end of their time period. So it referred to that as the hereafter. When 2012 came along, that was significant, as I say, where the natural nature was bringing sacred feminine or female rule back into power. So we're moving back to a matriarchal society. That incident or event known as Procession Change 2012, and that is known as the thereafter. When the axis of the planet starts to point either towards the center of the galaxy where there's a massive black hole, or point away from the center of the galaxy, that changes the energy on the planet. Understood? And so we logged that in our ancient calendar. It's got nothing to do with the Mayans per se. The Mayans learned that from the Anasazi or the Olmecs, who were, let's say, us as ancient Egyptians, or the Sands people who migrated over from southern Africa and moved up north and then migrated or walked over to what is called America today, when the continents, let's say, were one, which the Greeks referred to as Pangaea. So those are the pre-hereafter doctrine, the hereafter, and then the thereafter. And that thereafter or hereafter doctrine is when the actual facts came in. Yeah, so when we move from the religions and say we're going back to our ancient Egyptian knowledge, information, culture, so on and so forth. So in the first 30 years dealing with the religious degrees, and the second half an hour or 30 years is now where we started getting back into our culture. Understood? And why there's so much emphasis not only on our culture, but again our language, and obviously getting our land back. That spiritual science is known as Wu-Sabat. Yeah, and what would have been uncovered in those 30 years, whether we accepted it or not, continues to be uncovered, is that the various deities as conveyed in the monotheistic religious degrees, if you go back and check some of the tablets beforehand, Enuma Gilgamesh epics, the people sitting in the various different seats or job titles being conveyed in the Bible are nothing more than extraterrestrials of the Sumerian doctrine, by various different names and titles, as I say, who've been manipulating human beings on the planet Earth for many thousands of years for their own ends and purposes, and continue to do so even into today's time. Yes, so no unicorns are not real, you understand? No prophets flying on horses with wings on it, you understood? And many other the mythological stories that are being conveyed in the Bible, but real issues for us to be conveyed, as I say, which has blocked or affected our spiritual development as human beings, because racism, hatred, all these different things were introduced according to their Bible story in chapter 3:15, when their God put enmity between Eve's seed and what they refer to as the serpent's seed, although the serpent is not called the devil. That was the birth, according to their story, of racism and all the various different isms that have affected human development. Okay, so let's move on. A lot to cover today. Again, as I say, we've gone through this many times before. We do cover a number of racial subjects. Sometimes we talk about genetics and genes primarily. And so we do have a statement: no one wins a race in racism. So we are not a promoter or teacher of race hate. But I say, when we're teaching facts, we're talking about genetics, you need mature people in the room. So we do touch upon race in these classes, but we don't practice wrong racism. So wrong racism is the suppression of another race to further your own race. Yeah, right racism is racial pride, in our case. Being proud of who we are naturally, and promoting that and learning about ourselves, etc. And so in doing that, then we're obviously able to show care and consideration for others, yeah, being comfortable and confident in who we are, which has been denied from us in many of the places that we've sought to live around the world. Even if the people around us look like us, others have sought to foster their way of life, their religions, their deities, so on and so forth, upon us as what they call being civilized. Yeah, their way of life. And even the first world people today are known as third world people. So the people that were here first are considered to be third world people, not first world people. So touched upon this in the last class in more detail. So it's about the who you are as opposed to the what you have become, understood by the various different decisions that we have made in this society. It's got various different psychological names now, imposter syndrome and different things of that nature. But these are things that we had to do for survival, and it's created, say, an uneasy separation insofar as we have neglected the real self or the real us to some degree, that we don't even know who we are or what we are even. You understand? To say what as well. We don't even know what we are or who we should be or what we're supposed to be growing into. So this is what Wu-Sabat seeks to address, or Wu-Sabat, excuse me, seeks to address, and why the master teacher has written certainly well over 1,200 books at the last count, addressing everything from religion to people's sex lives, everything you need to know about human being, human existence, and then who we are as supreme beings. Understood? With proof, and asking you to seek confirmation, not believe anything that we say. Yeah, don't believe me. Check it out. It's a famous saying of the master teacher, Dr. Malachi Z, could be New York. Now, there's forces within Wu-Sabat, the forces of Nupu, 9 ether, and its counterpart Zupu. So if you take that N, for example, and you turn it on its side, then I'll take an N, you turn it on its side, and to the end, and turn it on its side, you get the Zupu. Understood? And here you see the Nubo and its access and connection to the heavens. And then here we see this symbol here, there's a bass where that in 6 ether, that is cut off. So 9 represents living life, and then the death of 9 ether is 6 ether. So 6 ether causes things to decay and die. So 2 opposing forces in nature. Understood? And here you see that the life force, they will cut it, is cut off, or in the case of 6 ether, I suppose is 9 ether is growth into form or system, and 6 ether is change in form or system. So in dealing with 6 ether, you're doing less potent gases or forces of 9 ether, yes, or partial destruction of those original creative forces. Yeah, so these are 2 primary forces, but that are in nature. And Zupu represents fire, and symbolically, and Nupu represents water. And water, as you know, puts out fire, as the 6 can never escape the 9. As you see, 18, which is 3 6s. Let's say 1 plus the 8 equals 9. Okay, let's move forward. So yeah, before I get into part 2, you see here the scientific definition of religion. The scientific definition, yeah. So is the interference of the dead into the lives of the living. So dead does not mean in the ground. Yeah. So this is maybe upgrading your knowledge. Dead means low energy. It can mean in the ground, but there are many types of death. Understood? And so dead means low energy in this context. So you see, in the dead are those negative forces in nature you must oppress, suppress, repress in order to depress and subsist of living substances and living beings in order to survive. Yeah, this is really important to understand. Yeah, the scientific reason for religion, its real purpose or true intent, yes, is to overlay itself, as say, against real sources and forces of energy, to be able to divert that energy to cause them to live off of us, yeah, because they are dying, or that energy force is dying or decaying, and it needs, as I say, in a symbiotic or parasitical relationship, it needs something to feed off of. Yes, and we become that for many races on the planet Earth to our detriment. Yeah, because we're caught up in things that we don't actually know has a hidden nefarious purpose oftentimes behind it. So even when you're dealing with the Mukasu or the Caucasians, understood, they pretend like they hate. They pretend like it's a love-hate relationship, some say. So they hate us but love everything we do. Yes, because we, as the children of the sun, yeah, Afaf Reye Ka'a'u, Africa they say, or Afaf from Reye, sun, and Ka'a'u, spirit, yeah, so from the spirit of the sun, yeah, as its children, yeah, like the moon has no light of its own, it gets its light from the sun. Yeah, so what we breathe out, what we do, obviously affects them. They want to be a part of it. They want part of it. You know, when we express that soul, they want that, yeah, from us. You know, what we breathe out, they feed off of. And hence why, as you see in the picture there, they like to get up close and breathe your breath, because it empowers them, it gives them life. And obviously touching various different energy points at certain times on our bodies. That's why you should never let anybody, I don't care who's not the mother and father, certainly while the baby is young, they like to come along and say, oh, the baby is cute, oh, how cute, da 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 da, and touch the baby's head, understood, where there is a at the molar, they call chakra, I think there's another name in Uzbek, it leaves me, Adushat is one of the older words, I think, and touch the top of the baby's head, where there's an energy center there. So they're taking, not only from a hygienic point of view, we shouldn't let strangers touch our children. In fact, which you may find difficult to accept, but culturally, nobody other than the mother and father of the child should be touching the baby anyway for the first 2 years. The baby's immune system is not designed to house different types of energies in that regard. So if you want optimum children, which is what we're going to get back to producing, optimum children, then we're going to have to start to embrace some of the harder aspects of our culture in the right environment. Understood? Because human beings or adults carry germs. And I know that it's that you break the heart of grandparents, uncles, aunties, so on and so forth. But as I say, a baby's not really supposed to be handed around because, as I say, somebody coming off of work, visiting your house at a tough day or whatever, stressed out, come, yes, oh, the baby's nice, da 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 da, transferring all of this unintentionally, I should say, transferring all of this negative energy and germs from outside for this baby to contend with. So the issue is that whilst we've probably all gone through it and we've survived, etc., you don't know the power of the soul. And this is what we're going to start pointing out today, and the value of the soul. And if you don't know who you are or what you are, how can you cultivate yourself to potential and perfection? And how do you know what behaviors and so on and so forth are detrimental to your development? From before we even have sex to conceive the child, to when the child is in the womb, to the child is being born. You only know what they've told you. And even in the UK in particular, yeah, Black women are overrepresented in dying from childbirth. Something certainly in the Western Hemisphere is considered to be a rarity. But yet Black women are finding themselves overrepresented in dying in childbirth. So maybe the way in which they're teaching us various different things, we've always got to compromise, isn't it, between what we're being told and what's always best for our situation. They don't place any value on the soul, because when they ask someone, how much are you worth? The person might say, they report it in pounds or dollars. Oh, the person's worth $1 million, or the person's worth £1 million, whatever the case may be. What has that got to do with the soul? The soul is priceless in this society today. So they place no value on natural things. And that's because the nature of them is unnatural. Look at what is getting produced, unnatural things. And that always happens, as I say, at the lower end of the cycle, when they come along. So let's move through, as we got plenty to get through, as I say. So this spell of ignorance, in different cultures, it was known as different things. So in Egypt, it's called the spell of Amam, and that is dealing with the spell of amnesia, us forgetting, as I say, who we were and that connection. We built the pyramids, and now we've forgotten how we did it. Saying forgotten many things, which herbs heal from the ground, so on and so forth. Yes, our genetic memory connecting us from generation through generation has been interrupted, understood, by adverse forces of the Celtic religion, in the sense Wicca religion, which have cast those spells upon us, understood, and caused detriment to why we now have to be taught or retaught, or have to remember, in a sense, or respect, to look again to get back that which we have lost. Yeah, religion, the spell of Kingu in Sumeria was where we started to look outside of ourselves and started to worship things in nature, understood, and say you see people worshiping the sun and so on and so forth, or worshiping aspects of nature. Now what I'm saying, the sun to us in ancient Egypt is our ancestor, but worshiping natural things, as you see in religion now, what's happened is that the aspects of religion, people, or where the confusion is coming, is because the actual movements of suns, stars, and various different planetary bodies, understood, which were planetary bodies and understood to be that in our culture, through misunderstood symbolism by the ancient Sumerians, by the descendants of those following the ancient Sumerians, ancient Babylonians. The monotheistic religions, interpreted the movements of certain star constellations because as people. So anthropomorphically, planets, when people are telling stories, they can be represented as people. Yeah, so if someone say Venus, for example, it can be a planet, but it's also perceived to be the god of love. You can say Mars, for example, it is a planet. We know it's a planet, but Mars is also in Roman mythology the god of war. So certain people or certain cultures have taken that and forgot that those people are planets, and as I say, they have become real, or worshipping real things, create tribes around them, so on and so forth, and it's all to do with cosmology. And so once that happened, that put us under a spell, because we don't know the real symbolism of what's sitting behind certain things. So people are thinking Abraham is a real person, Solomon is a real person, and these are all symbolic titles. And you start getting into the detail of it, and again, all of that messing up the mind and has to be set straight and uncovered and cured. And then in this day and time, biblically speaking, the spell of Leviathan is dealing with the spell of the dollar bill, understood, or pound sterling, and how we're putting money, let's say, over our esoteric or spiritual development, understood, when actually, if you look at it, it's not worth the paper that it's even printed on. You understand? Because none of the currencies today, as we see them, are backed by gold. So all of this collectively is known as the Rakoi Shalem Nawum, the spell of sleep. Yeah, this spell of ignorance, which has many different characteristics, one of them being, as I say, not being able to recognize leadership as well in our own skin color. Yes, so things that, as I say, our eyes, our two physical eyes and our mind's eye are not working as one. Yeah, so we see, yet we don't see. And from a hearing point of view, we hear certain things, but we don't hear. And the spell, one of the ways in which that's played is in language. Okay, so let's move right through now into where we were in the last class. Are there any questions before I move into part two?
There's no questions on my side, my part.
Okay, understood. Tell that.
And we have no current questions here either.
Tell that.
Yeah, no current questions.
Okay, where were we? Oh, it seems we did cover this last week. Sorry, I'm not trying to make you sick, people. Let me just trying to find where we are. Okay, here we go. Right, okay, so in part one, reflection and projection. In part one, reflection and projection, we taught you about the triad of existence. So the necessity that in existence, we have space, matter, and time, and the three are inseparable. You cannot have one without the other. And so you see this triad principle. So Sabaeans are numerologists, so we deal with the science of numbers. We are ontologists, we deal with the essence of being, so we want to get to the root of a thing, you understand what it really is. And we are factologists, so we're dealing with factual information, let's say the new spirituality in this day and time. So triad principles are another aspect which, say, features heavily within our culture, yeah, and permeates itself not only in the culture but everything we do. Even the language is based on trilateral roots, the Sabaic language based on trilateral roots, and placing those roots of letters, as I say, which we would call consonants in English, into various different forms to express different types of meaning. Understood? Yes. So so this is one of the keys to understanding that everything in our culture has significance, it has meaning, and it ties back into keeping our connection to our ancestors, yeah, to natural nature. And our ancestors we called, say, Parnatharu, who we understood to be suns. The sun, you see, 93 million miles away, that gives us life and that sustains life on this planet, is one of our ancestors, yeah, which they would call, say, Parnatharu, or overseers. Yes, that's what they were called by the ancient Egyptians. Their proper name was Mur-Zaku, or Rizqians, yeah, providers. So we had a very clear view of what our ancestors were, and that we were, as animists, in an energy state first, or we believe that everything, or life as we know it, comes from the soul, or we tend from a soul force first. So the sun in its gaseous state, if you think about higher life forms being in the form of a gas, yeah, you slow those molecules down, it produces a liquid. You slow those molecules down, it produces a solid. Yeah, it's a solid, liquid, and gaseous free triad. Again, another triad principle. So as we slowed down in vibration from that gaseous state, we manifested, obviously, as woolly-haired, melanated or dark-skinned individuals. Obviously, say dark skin, we have a range of skin tones within our race, or 9 physical ethers, from high kind of yellow caramel all the way to kind of blue black. You understand? All of that is within the different physical ethers. Yeah, so when we describe them as different species within our race, understood, as part of that, and that's a manifestation coming down from that gaseous state. Hence why we are referred to as descendants, versus ancestors, where an means son. Yeah, if you look it up in various different languages, suncestors, if you put it in English, and we descended down from that gaseous state as the terrestrial form of the sun. Yeah, and we still have a lit sun inside of us, referred to as a solar plexus. Now, so triad of existence, 3 parts: blackness. So we were going into dark energy, dark matter, so on and so forth. We dealt with the naught and ought principles. So that's dealing with the fact that you have this intertwining, 3 and 4, a bit similar, but it's intertwining, excuse me, of the what you're calling spiritual, the etheric world, which is really, to keep it simple, the world of energy, versus not versus, but as it evolves then and slows down in vibration to become the world of matter. So in this society today, hydrogen is they consider to be the lightest atom, H1, obviously all the way down to H99, which they took from us as in the 99 deities, understood, of ancient Egypt in various different groupings who are responsible for creating the elements that we see today: earth, water, wind, fire, so on and so forth, on the physical plane. And you see also, when you step back from that, hydrogen obviously was classified as the lightest atom, but obviously in the 60s when they fired these hydrogen atoms together from a cyclotron and smashed them and found that they were made up of smaller pieces, then obviously they're not the first point of existence as they would classify it today, because they're made up of smaller things. So in our delineation in that understanding, you have E1 to E99, which is ether 1 all the way down to ether 99. So for every physical atom, there's an etheric counterpart, understood, yeah? Or some may describe it as the blueprint in the sand before the physical manifests, and there's different rules apply to how these planes of existence work. Yeah, so again, clear differentiation between that. So when we say nothing or naught, yeah, nothing is not non-existence. Nothing is just things that don't sum up to something that can be weighed. So the world of things versus the world of sum, S-U-M dot things, yeah, things that can be weighed, at least by modern day instrumentation. Yeah, so that's where they're logging things within existence. And if you think about it as, say, just to make it probably a bit more simple, when a child is being born, for example, and we went through this last time, we don't record the part of inception. We log it in time in our society because of our instrumentation. We log it at the point of conception. But even at that point, it's logged after the fact. It's not logged before the fact, generally speaking. Yes? So something has to happen, i.e., menstrual cycle stops, or someone takes a test. Something has to happen after the event. And even that is still not, it's logged from a medical point of view, but if it's fairly early in the process, the laws in this country and various places around the world allow the termination of that child before it comes to fruition. Yeah, because it's still not logged, in inverted commas, properly as having rights, i.e., say, can't be killed or murdered, etc. Well, obviously, while we may feel that way, nature's rules are nature's rules, in a sense. Obviously, if you take a life, then there are spiritual consequences or rules, that get triggered as a result, understood. And if a man thinking, well, wasn't party to the decision, it was the girl who I was with or woman who I was with who made the decision, both are responsible and both take the consequences of that decision, in nature's rules, because you are party to the decision. So there's no separation in terms of male or female, so in that regard. So I say people have done it through ignorance. I'm not here to judge, nothing of that nature. It is what it is, and this is part of, as we talked about, spiritual ignorance and certain subjects that we talk about in Wu-Sabat. As a people, as a first generation, we've made many mistakes, and we're gonna learn, we're gonna evolve, and make the children better, in a sense, and they make the children better, so on and so forth, until we get back to that supreme state, supreme mind, living our right culture, etc., etc. So we did many things, or continue to do many things out of ignorance, understood? But that's not a reason, as they like to do in this society, I suppose. YOLO, you only live once, and make certain mistakes, and then initiate a pathway of self-destruction, drinking, drugs, so on and so forth. No, we have to stand up like men and women, incarnated souls, and take the hits like we've always done, and do the best what we can do with what we have. So we learned about, say, the world of things. So to finish that point, I should say, not to go rambling off, but to finish that point is to say that in the society they log the baby in time, understood, when the baby's born. Yeah, because obviously it's born, you get a birth certificate, so on and so forth, and we know obviously you can't terminate a baby after a certain amount of weeks, unless you get a court order. Listen to that, get a court order to do so. But obviously, once the baby's born now, there's no termination. ruling in that. So really that's when the baby's logged in time. So there's a world, and at one time when the technology didn't allow us to see inside the womb, so on and so forth. Remember, that was a mystery to various cultures back then. So that was in the darkness until instrumentation allows you to see, then it's visible again. So your starting point changes, or can change, based on your technological abilities at that time. So if we were able to log inception, then that may change the way in which the society then models its rules and morals and some laws and so on and so forth. Understood? But there's a differentiation between the world of nothingness and the world of some things. I've said, or make it simple for some people, ether or energy versus matter. We touched also upon the 9 principles of a human being, as opposed to the 3 that you're taught in this society: body, spirit, and soul. And we, let's say, looked at the spiritual side of that, those 9 principles, in a little bit more detail, and its role, I suppose, the Ka'ah's role in linking our mind, which we call mind, into the mental. Understood? And how that taps in to that. So basically, in that part 1, what we were seeking to do, and continue to do so, is making that which we can't see, demonstrating that it's real. So just because we can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Understood? And so that darkness, which is they play a little emphasis on in this society, is the majority of what we're calling existence. Yeah, it makes up most of it. In fact, the world of light, or what we can see, pales in significance to what we can see. Understood? Yeah. And when we're breaking down, as I say, if you think about the existence in that regard, the latter part of it, remember we broke down the fact that 90% of it is blackness, 10% of that dark matter or whatever, 10% is the visible, all the suns, stars, moon, so on and so forth. You add up all of those, they make up 10% of that blackness within existence. Understood? Yeah. So 24% dark energy, 76% dark matter, and then we break down that 10% of that dark matter is then, as I say, the visible light of things that we see. In a sense, but the emphasis has been placed upon light in this society, and you say enlightened. Understood? Because when the Europeans when there was no incandescent and fluorescent lighting, so no electrical light as you see on the walls in ancient Egypt, remember they were reading books by candlelight. They couldn't see well in the dark as well, so that caused a fear of the dark because of their lack of minerals and nutrients in their body, the lack of vitamin A that they're able to produce. So they had bad eyesight, they couldn't see in the dark, so they were afraid of the dark. That fear then translates into how we perceive the dark. Understood? And then light became, because I used to read by candlelight with books, light became synonymous and associated with knowledge. So we talk about being enlightened, but there's no light bulb. When you cut up in a person's head, there's no light in the person's head, light bulb. Understood? So all intellect, all intelligence, etc., comes out of blackness. So the world of things gave birth to the world of some things. Yeah, so when they say everything happens for a reason, you think about what you're saying there. Yeah, everything happens for a reason. Things, the world of things. Yeah, if that statement be true, I'm not saying it is. Everything happens for a reason. Yeah, as and when it happens. Which we touched upon last time. If you're falling out of a window, yes, that is what's supposed to be happen. As and when you fall out the window, yeah, you can make different decisions that don't lead to that outcome. Yeah, so when people get hurt or something bad happens, they say, well, everything for a reason. It happened for a reason. Yes, it did happen for a reason, because of the decisions that we made or we were party to. Even if we was in the wrong place, or what we consider to be the wrong place at the wrong time, yeah, and got injured in doing something, it's a result of decisions happening. Yeah, either to us, for us, but if you understand, we are the center of our own universe. Everything is revolving at least around us to us in that regard. Yeah, so we have to understand both of those worlds, or importantly to understand what is taking place so we can regain control. So there are two primary forces in the universe, very powerful forces, not primary forces, but they're very powerful: mental power and sexual power. So symbolically or numerologically, 9 represents mental power, and 6 or sex represents physical power. Yes, and if you look at the circle at the top of the diagram, yes, the 9 is, in this day and time, what we're seeking to get back to, remember, is that the mind now must dominate sex or mind over physical power. So we're becoming more mental than physical. Even if you look at the children being born today, their physical bodies are much smaller than if you compare them maybe to 60, 70 years ago, when our grandfathers, great-grandfathers were being born. Understood? So basically, we're supposed to be becoming, I'm not saying that we are, but we're supposed to be becoming more mental than physical. Yeah, mind must dominate desires of the body, desires of the flesh, so on and so forth. Yeah, the mind, 9 over 6. Yeah, mind over, or spiritual or esoteric over the physical. Yeah, this is what we're moving into or being guided into. And these diagrams are showing you how, even though obviously when we're drawing things and diagrams, you see obviously it's like this, it's on levels, isn't it? Yes, but it's to get your mind away from, yes, it is up or it's higher, but it's not up as in they're stacked above each other. They are intertwining. Understood? Various different levels of vibrational energy within systems. Yeah, so we can talk about a plane, for example. A plane is moods of vibrational energy within a system. So people say the physical plane, the plane of force, but they interact with each other. So for example, your skin, yes, is made of keratin, but then so are your nails. Yeah, so there's subtle differences in vibration. So the same thing appearing obviously in different forms. So the planes are all here and now existing and intertwining with each other. However, it takes a specially crafted individual, this Amunabab Hakta Pahanut Thedi, understood, to be able to determine the differences between them, because us as Nagaru, being fully manipulated beings, a manifestation of dark matter, dark energy, that blackness, have access or the ability to descend up and down these ether plane, the levels of ether. Yeah, so can interact, sink in, vibrate with these different planes or dimensions, etc. It's not hidden or beyond us from the way of we have been equipped with soul, spirit, and physical structure and body. Understood? But someone has to teach you. You wouldn't know the difference between the two. And your pineal gland, which obviously is supposed to vibrate, is vibrating in sync with the plane of existence that we are on. Yes, this is why when they say link it to the third eye, is because it's our ability to, or one's ability, hidden obviously at the moment or dormant, to then transform into different and travel between different planes of existence. Understood? But one has to, you have to know in order to be able to sync in with it. Same like when somebody, when you see us as blacks syncing in with rhythms, and saying, which has been associated with having soul. Yeah, it's our ability to sync in with certain rhythms, sync in with certain frequencies. Yeah, which we naturally have having melanin. So, as I say, these two forces. So the lower half of the circle is considered to be, and we're going to get into another diagram in a bit, but lower side of the circle is mind, lower side is sex, upper is mind. Some also consider this to be alive and this to be deteriorating or dead. Insane, because when a person has sex, sex leads to what? Birth, correct? And when you're born, you die. That's when you're destined to die. Yes? Let's see if you understand that reality. So again, similar diagrams to show the interaction, and we get into this in a latter section in more detail. But just to make that point, there's an interaction between what we call in the etheric world and the physical world, all of which is within us. Hence why we talk about 9 principles and how those different aspects of us are powered differently. Understood? We're not just powered by food, understood, and water, and those sort of physical elements need to sustain the body. Breathing is absolutely essential. Even what we're reading, we're empowered by reading information, taking information in, but that is a form of energy in itself. When you watch television, so on and so forth, you're taking light, sound, energy. These are powering or having an impact on different aspects of our being. Now, for us to understand some of the links between our etheric and our physical side, this is quite good. So it's one of our prayers, the second prayer. It's referred to as freaking. If we look at the words here, we'll focus in English for now, for everybody's understanding. It says, "O ancient ones, guard us, you all from whom birthed our ancestors and our families." Yeah, talking about our higher ancestors, "from whom are fashioned into soul, from whom were spirits, from whom are ether, yeah, from whom were flesh and blood." So it's expressing to us here that basically we descended down, as I say, from these different stages of, as I say, what we're calling this blackness, or this world of energy, yeah, this world of nothingness, yeah, where we came from. And as I say, what is important for you to import is that you are connected. This is what you can prove. Forget about any spook or spirits. You are connected. The fact that you're here means that you must have had a mother and father, and their mother is connected to their mother's mother and father, so on and so forth. This is your soul seed. This is our connection. Understood? And we must accept that reality of who and what we are first, before jumping off into things that we cannot prove. So there is a clear pathway being described here of how we connect. Yeah, and really to activate that power, inform and correctly, we have to respect that pathway. It's not about jumping thousands, hundreds of thousands of years and calling upon Asaru or Asar or Isis or whoever. You understand? The names are not even that important. Or if you're going to call that, you might as well call Jesus or Muhammad. It's how one is connecting and who is doing the connecting for you. As I say, belief and faith do not lead to the right outcomes necessarily. As I say, your car might have broke down by the motorway. I say this all the time. Car might have broke down by the motorway. You've got 9 or 10, you've got 10 digits on your phone. Yeah, 0 to 9, just 10 digits. Understood? If you can't remember the number to call the whoever, emergency services, AA, whatever the case may be, who you may have a contract with to service your car or whatever to get you home, you're going to be stuck there. Doesn't matter how much faith and belief. You need to know the number to call, the right combination of numbers to call to get the help you need. So that works in the physical. Yes, knowledge, knowing, not belief and faith. I don't care how much you can press those buttons. Let me tell you something, you stand a better chance of winning the lottery than to get the right combination of number to dial the AA if you don't know the number. Yeah, so in esoteric understanding, you have to connect with the right forces. Yeah, you're born and look a certain way from a reason, from internal things that are taking place. We're not shaped from the outside in, we're being shaped from the inside out. So when we look at this combination, it's very clear that there's a certain pathway that we have to understand, and that's taken away. Anything you mention we're ancestors for certain people, no, that's heathen. You know what I mean? That's devil worship. That's this, that. There's so many connotations connected adversely with the word ancestors. But the question is, who was teaching that information? Who was saying it? Where's it come from? Who taught you Freemasonry was bad? Who's teaching that? While they run the world, Masons run the world. Who taught you it was bad? The same people who's telling you stay away from it, stay away from ancient Egypt. The same people who's telling you that are the same people digging up, making thousands, spending millions, multiple millions on documentaries teaching about ancient Egypt, but telling you as black people stay away from it. These are the things that the master has having to cause us to think again. Think again. We wasn't thinking, wasn't even asking questions. Sitting up in the churches, the synagogues and the mosques, belief, and getting our heads whooped up continuously. It doesn't matter how much emotion that we put into things, it doesn't lead to right outcomes. Right outcomes is from right thinking, and so which leads to right actions. And in order to get right thinking, you need right knowledge, right wisdom, and you need right understanding, leading to right overstanding, into sound right reasoning. In order to do that, you need the right information as it pertains to us. Now, when we're dealing with reflection and projection, this is very interesting. You're going to have to do some work to understand a bit how the mind works and various different other bits and pieces of that nature, to know exactly what's going on and how we can take control. Remember, we said that in right knowledge, we were breaking down that spell. One of the descriptions that the master teacher gave was to talk about spiritual ignorance and racial blindness. This is really important. So that spiritual ignorance, not knowing how the spiritual world works, and then racial blindness is basically not knowing the evil one in its many different forms, i.e. not being able to look and see whether certain things are working for and against you. Understood? Yeah, very important, obviously, for survival. You understand who are your friends, your enemies, so on and so forth. Do they look like you? Are they the opposite of you? So on and so forth. The white man is the devil. Obviously, missed out the black devil. So, yes, because COINTELPRO, meant that they just hired people who looked like us but thought like them to infiltrate organizations and bring them down within. So basically that was insufficient teachings, you understand, for that day and time still being purported by certain organizations today. So that was insufficient. And then you got to even understand, well, what's your definition of devil, to understand what we're talking about. Because biblical devil is one thing, in Quran it means something different, so on and so forth. In the Torah, is that word devil in the Torah? And who's being associated with the word devil? So is that our definition? What was it back in, when we were in our supreme state or supreme mind? What did that mean to us in that regard? So these are the things that are important. So let's take verse 9 of reflection and projection. So it says, Amusbatu, it is that tashura, emotions, which cause imaginary ecstasy, which affect the mind, as well as creation and destruction, between these 2 points. Yes, ladud, birth, and mawat, death. 10, your energy, nashat, energy, especially in the form of spirit beings, can be very deceitful if not overstood by you. Many times a person sees or thinks they see a person, things in a vision, tayaf, ghost, shadow or orb while they dream, or 12, they see a mudhar, spectre, or one who appears while they are wide, sahur, awake, with the ayanti, eyes open. It can be what is being viewed is right inside them. So imagine this. Now, when we looked at a previous diagram, it showed the soul as energy, and then the secondary soul, or a second soul, the Rawu. So the Ba'ah soul as energy, and the Rawu soul as motion. Yes, so there we have two souls, yes, and two spirits in actuality. But one is like energy, and then one is the motion of that energy being expressed. So if you think about, I mean, this maybe a poor example, but I'm going to use it anyway. But you think about, you got money in your bank account. Understood? Yeah, if I've got £1,000 in my bank account, that it represents, maybe poorly, but it represents a certain type of energy. When I then go and spend it, it's in a different state, isn't it? So basically the money, or the money in the bank account, the potential of it is that soul. And then when I move it to go and do something, it becomes the Rawu in that form. Understood? So this is talking about what is birthing certain things or causing. So there's a certain level of excitement amongst us, you understand, or drive, or when things happen, that drives a certain type of vision. Understood? Yeah, so this is what we're going to work through and see what's happening. So we can see different types here. Astral projection, when we're sleeping, we can experience visions in this state. Obviously dreams, and another example, let's just see the middle one, seems to be moving around it. Out-of-body experiences, so near-death experiences and various different things. Yeah, so we're looking at sometimes what is causing these things, what is driving these things that we are seeing outside of ourselves, or seemingly seeing outside of ourselves. Yeah. Now, one of the things that's important to understand is that our perception of the world around us is very small, insofar as obviously we are perceiving the world around us through our senses. Now, when we look at our visionary senses, I'm sure a lot of you on the phone maybe know this, but if you don't, then it's a good lesson for you. So human beings see, when we're picking up light energy, they measure it in waves. Yeah, so the tip of the wave to the tip. Yeah, so and so human beings see in terms of light waves. We see, and light doesn't move but it appears to move in waves because it's being affected by dark matter. Understood? So imagine you're driving your car, and sometimes you're driving on a smooth surface, you don't really feel it in the steering wheel. But if you drive on a more rough surface, you see it translate back into the steering wheel, and you can feel it. Understood? So energy really moves in straight lines, matter moves in circles. So it's really moving in straight lines, but it's been affected by, as I say, smaller particles, dark matter particles that are affecting its motion. So they say, okay, well, it moves in waves. Now, here we see the visible light spectrum. So we were talking about this in, I think, in the breath class, about seeing this red and blue symbolism used, like the boxing ring, for example, the political parties, so on and so forth. So we're talking about it in connection to the breath. And now you see also relates to how light, excuse me, is perceived. So remember, when you talk about light, it is particles moving in darkness at a specific speed that determines its color. Yeah, so that's what's happening there. So if you think about the visible light spectrum between 400 to 700 nanometers, this is what we're able to see. It is this small aspect. So this is a whole spectrum here in this diagram, at least. And so we're only looking at a small part of it. So radio waves, you can't see them, not because they don't exist, it's because we can only pick up, yes, within 400 to 700 nanometers, yeah, as we've been taught. We don't see, excuse me, the infrared track. We can see the light in the remote control, but if you press the remote control, you don't see the infrared light in that type of remote control, because it's below, or it's larger, excuse me, than 700 nanometers. We don't see X-rays, at least with our eyes, because they are what? They are smaller than 400 nanometers. So it doesn't mean things don't exist just because we can't see them. There are things that exist, a big world, mighty world, gigantic world of things that we cannot see because our eyes are not wired to see them, not because they don't exist. Same with sound. Human beings hear between 20 to 20,000 hertz, understood? So obviously below that, they call it infrasound, under, and then ultra for beyond. But you see the confusion. This is why they mess up with words. So let's go back there. So infra in sound is being used for the smaller, but infra in light waveform is being used for the larger waveforms. It's just hella confusing. You can see it's confusing. So the larger waves is infra, then ultra is for the smaller ones, and then obviously when we're dealing with sound now, they reverse it around again, so it'll create confusion there. Yeah, so ultra for the larger sounds and infra for the smaller. So the here we see the fact that basically, well, because we're only hearing between this range, other life forms like bats and elephants are basically their perception of the world around them is larger than that of a human being. And the master's expressing to us in tones and vibrational energy, actual fact, look, sound relates to you and what you receive from space and beyond. It's not just what you hear through your ears. Understood? It's talking about what we receive out. So that outformation coming in, that is what we are considering as sound, or our relationship to sound, how it relates to us and how we interpret it. So at the moment, we're only interpreting it, ideally, through this range, considered to be the normal human range, but is that based on what we're taught? You understand? Or based on what it should be? Is it based on what we're taught or what it actually should be? We don't know, because obviously we only know what they've taught us. Understood? Yes? So, again, you see these sort of three primary colors, natural colors, yeah, red, yellow, and blue. In there, everything else is man-made, so to speak, or artificial coloring that's not blue, yellow, and red. But they are particles moving in darkness. Again, just another sort of diagram. It's reiterating the how small or how much of the existence that we don't see, that we're not necessarily privy to or taking into from our eyes at least, or conscious senses in that regard. And here you see the kind of color scales and how, again, color as a direct correlation relationship to sound. One can be converted into the other. And if we overlay those colors of Atun Reye, and then Amun Reye, understood? Yes, we see the correlation between sound and light, so the symbolism that we're seeing here in our culture. So all things like this, again, we must start paying more attention to, well, why did the Tamarayans or the ancient Egyptians or the Patama Maye, why did our ancestors, why did they do this? Why did they do that? Why have they positioned this that way? Why are they using that color? Everything means something. And it's a message to us to start paying attention to. Yes, not being ignorant to it. And starting to open up our eyes and look and double take and see, why are they doing that? Why is she standing in that position? Why is he drawn like that, so on and so forth? Why is he holding that symbol in that position? That's how specific our people were. And so we have to understand this world around us. Now, why I say is it about power perception is because, excuse me, why I say it's about power perception, because when we look, for example, and we see our eyes, and we're looking at our retina, we find out it's made up of rods and cones, as they call it. You have two different types of cells. And so we're interested in, okay, well, based on that, so cones enable us to see colors, yes, and rods enable us to see black and white. So basically, you need rods to see in the dark. And so you think about when we're in a dark place or whatever, and if you was to close your eyes, then you would out into darkness. It would take a few, you understand, several seconds or whatever, maybe a couple of minutes or so your eyes to adjust to the environment. Obviously, you're able to see in the dark because many of us live in cities. We're not necessarily in the country. If we grew up in the country, we'd have probably better eyesight. Living in the dark. If you think about, you go Jamaica or Caribbean or whatever, and you go Africa and other places where there's low levels of light, there's no necessarily street lighting everywhere, so on and so forth, certainly in the country areas, those individuals have got superior night vision, as you would call it, or shadow vision. Yes. Somebody would say, well, you need, things about you need a torch and different things. People just use their eyes. So how much of our sense has been deadened by bad information? So the question is, how many rods have we got and how many cones? So cones enable you to see colors, and rods enable you to see in darkness. Yeah. So let's think about how much do you think we should have, based on the fact that we use our eyes mostly when it's light. You would think, okay, well, we should have more cones than we should have rods. Yes, because we use our eyes more to see in the daytime than we do at night. Understood? Yeah, but look at the amount of rods here compared to the cones. Now, and you can see, look, so rods slightly larger, cones slightly larger, and then we see that we've got multiple rods. Interesting enough, in that hexagonal shape again, you didn't see that patterning. Remember, when we were doing the breath class, we saw that same structural shape when we were looking at chemoreceptors in cells. So this is the amount. So 90 roughly. Yeah. So when you're looking at percentage, maybe 6 to 7 million cones versus 120 million odd rods. So basically, we've got a significant amount of rods versus cones. Yeah, cones, colors, rods enable us to have night vision. So by design, this is a question to you. So by design, are we able to see? By design, are we able to see better in darkness or light? That doesn't make sense on the screen, does it? Are we able to see better in darkness or in light? Answers in the chat, please. Are we able to see better in darkness or in light based on this design? And while waiting for that, any questions?
Go on.
No, there's no questions on my side at the moment.
Okay.
All right. There are 2 questions here.
Excellent. Go for it while people are answering.
This is from iHotep. You were talking about the Sans people in South Africa. And he asked the question, were the first people on the planet, did they originate from South Africa, or was their origin from elsewhere?
So when we talk about the origin, so excuse me, good question. So when we talk about the origin, the Sans people will be best described as hominids, and that's when we emerge from the waters. Yeah. So the waters were placed here originally when our ancestors, known as the Murazaku, under a project called Project 24, they were based in the continent at the time before the Ice Age on Antarctica, and they placed certain cells, developed cells from previous projects in the waters here, and so we were in the waters as mermen and mer women. You understand? This is where your mermaid myth comes from. Tsunamis then threw us onto the waters, and we emerged out of the Okavango swamp, in the same, because basically those cells were placed in the Indian Ocean, and we emerged out of the Okavango swamp. As women, the women came out first and basically had to adapt, their lungs had to adapt to breathe in less dense form of water, which we call water vapor today. Understood? So that's where we came from. We talk about a planetary structural setup, but our DNA, male DNA, comes from the Orion star constellation, and feminine DNA comes from the Sirius star constellation. So if that's the question, we are extraterrestrial in origin, at least to this planet. Hence why our hair texture is different to the animals and so on and so forth from the planet. So we're extraterrestrial in nature. We're not the only race that's extraterrestrial, but we are extraterrestrial in nature. Next question.
There's another question from A60 Pro. I'm going to assume that's the device they're using. It says, it's a more general question. It says, I am new to the group and I am in Scotland. I would like to know where and how I can join in full and know more. I've been listening for at least 5 to 6 years. I have been following and I have wanted to join but never had the chance. But now I have. Please help me. I want to know more.
I suppose excellent, and Tap for your question. Thank you for your question. So maybe if you can assist him in connecting with us, so we can take that offline.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yes, to us. I appreciate that. Okay, any questions? Any more questions?
There's a few answers to the question you asked earlier about the rods and cones.
Okay, so I can see that in the chat. So darkness, yeah. So by design, isn't it? We're able to see better in darkness. But perception, what we've been taught, what we believe in inverted commas, means that we believe that we can see better in the light. Yeah, because when you're faced with dark situations, you switch the light on. That's what most of us do. You switch the light unless you want to put yourself to the test, and then when you stub your toe on the side of the bed, that test's gone quick. You understand? So you stop doing that. Yeah. So the reality of the situation is, based on design, we should be able to see better in the darkness and the light. And interesting enough, this is more or Caucasian sort of calculations roughly, but can you see that? And I'm sure maybe if it was done more accurately, that correlation between the 90% of dark matter and 10% of it is visible. 10% is the light. See, that correlation is very similar to that of the universe, understood? Or existence, excuse me. And how it's structured. How we have that correlation with us. Out space and in space are exactly the rules are exactly the same. Similar design. Understood? So what you perceive in your mind, how you've been taught, affects what you see externally to you and how you interpret that. So bad information. When you look at that word information, remember, in a certain type of formation. Information affects your form. So if you're living in the image and after the likeness of someone else, understood, that you cannot optimize your form because you're trying to be somebody else. You're playing an acting role. As blacks living in this society, we should be given an Oscar. We should be given a BAFTA because we've been playing other than self and kind. Since we were born into this world, we were more innocent as children until something happened. Then, you understand, whatever, somebody made fun oftentimes of us because of the way we look, our skin color, lips, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, our innocence disappeared out the window and we started to play this separation of, you understand, who and what. So this is very important, understanding how internally affects how we perceive things externally. Reflection and projection. So, one of the things to understand for that is because the brain is a three-dimensional holographic computer. You understand? Now, this is something the master was teaching us well over 20 years ago, yeah, for help us understand it. Now, you may not understand what exactly is on the screen, but for those doing maybe further research, then basically you need to do some research on holograms. Now, these are diagrams, just keep it more simple, so I think there's more extensive ones now that you can refer to. But effectively, what happens when you're creating a hologram is that a laser beam is fired and you get this thing called a beam splitter. So basically what happens is one of the laser is split. So one hits the mirror, understood, and then one basically is fired into this object. And obviously as light passes through the object, the molecules vibrate, understood, as it's passing through, and it creates a pattern and a waveform, understood. So we've got this original beam and we've got this one, and what happens is they converge. So there is a crossover or an interference with the echoed beam or whatever that's formed, from hitting this object, this pyramid, and the unadulterated aspect of the laser. They converge, and that creates an image. And what happens is that's then the imprint is then placed on this photographic plate. Excuse me. And then, excuse me. What happens then is a secondary, moving over to this side, a secondary reference beam is fired from the same laser onto the developed film plate. So it's a photographic plate and it then has to be developed. So in firing this second reference beam against the developed film plate, this then, in simplistic terms, creates a three-dimensional image, or as it appears to be, at least, understood. Now, why is that interesting for us? Well, excuse me. Well, this is how the human brain works, understood? So our eyes basically form, or we use the electromagnetic energy within existence to form the that initial beam. Yeah, so the beam that's coming out, the object beam, that is coming out from our eyes. So we're using the electromagnetic spectrum in order to fire this laser light into the object, understood. Our reference beam is, in actuality, I know this diagram shows a little bit of a different explanation, but it's just to show you that there is correlation out there between the two types of explanation, a hologram and it's linked to the brain. So the reference beam is coming from our senses, our 5 different senses as they appear to be. Yes, so sight, smell, sound, so on and so forth. Yes, and what we have to understand is, and if you've not understood how your eyes work and in correlation with the brain, then it's obviously going to be quite interesting. I think most people are fairly aware. So what's happening is you are projecting out this laser type light, you understand, or using the electromagnetic spectrum to, as I say, fire out a beam, obviously at the object. So the object beam comes out from the eyes, understood, and then you're seeing an object. So in this instance, obviously it's showing a house. Let's see if I've gone a bit further closer to it. Yes. So we're looking at a house, trees, so on and so forth. Yes. So what happens is those light particles, they hit the object and then they get reflected back from the object, excuse me, onto our retina. There's a number of more complex processes, but they get fired back onto the retina, and it appears in the retina upside down. Understood. Now, in this kind of cortex area, the visual cortex area, or this part of the brain, the sensory information, obviously our knowledge, so on and so forth, this forms that cross-hatching, you understand, that we were talking about, or the interference, obviously, between the reference and the object being information. Understood. And so therefore what happens is that basically, based on that information, we construct, yes, the image in our head. And based off of this reference information, so on and so forth, we then flip that image, which is upside down, understood? Yes? And then project it back out onto the object that we were looking at. Understood? And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a projection. So the reflection part is that we're taking stuff inside, or for our understanding of reflection is another aspect to it as well. We're taking this information in. Understood? So we fired out this beam. The object gets light up, it comes back now, this information. It comes back into the eyes, onto the retina, it appears upside down. Understand? There is a hashing, like an interference aspect to it that takes place based on not only some element of refraction that takes place on the as it comes back through the retina, but then when it gets into the brain, let's say, because we're taking in sensory information as well and other things, knowledge, so on and so forth, that interference pattern takes place. And then, as I say, we then project out onto what we were looking at, our interpretation of what the object is. So the reality is that you are creating the image of what the object is in your head. Now, when you study holographic information storage, you're going to find out that it's significantly superior to the storage that we use in our computers, silicone and other things, etc. So it's a very efficient way to store, yes, large amounts of data, which obviously you can think about us from birth to life, all of what we've taken in. You need a serious hard drive for all of that information to be stored. So storing it hologramically allows efficient means of storage. But the important point is that the image that we are seeing externally is being generated internally. If we were looking at things as they are and as they are supposed to be, then we could not have optical illusions on the physical plane. You are aware, and you even play many games with each other, where there are things now where you show images, for example, to two different people, and people can interpret the colors on the screen differently. You understand? Even between men and women, got these exercises or whatever. You can get optical illusions. Yes, so things appear a certain way to one set of people, and when you look at it more closely, it's actually something completely different. So you're looking at an interpretation of the outside world which you are generating. Understood? That is what you are projecting out, what you see. So the question is, are you really looking at, have you really seen anybody? Or are you just looking at an interpretation of the person? And if you can't physically touch them, how do you know whether what you're looking at is a hologram or something real or whatever versus something that's not real? If you physically touch them, you don't know that. So this is the reality of who we are. We interpret the outside world. We are not seeing it for what it actually is. We're looking at our own interpretation of it. This is why, and information or memories can be stored when they talk about three dimension, because you can store it visually, you can store it audibly, but you can also store it by certain experiences. So for example, someone can smell. So basically your memories are almost everything that you see, take in, so on and so forth, is stored in our subconscious memory, and it's stored there like an undeveloped film negative. Understood? But senses, obviously, or sensory intake can trigger that image to be developed and then brought to the fore. So someone can smell, I don't know, their mum's cooking or whatever, and it invokes certain memories of the past. Understood? They might hear a certain tune, and that tune takes them back to when they first heard it or whatever, or these color combinations. That reminds me of da 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 da, and it draws forth these images. And when it draws forth that image, if you're in that state of imagination for that moment, I mean, you can see some people that their visual senses are that acute or whatever. They can really, it's almost as if they're there in the moment. Understood? So this is say how the brain works. Understood? I mean, that's why we have to have understanding of how we work. Remember, we've been talking about that for a while in terms of understanding, know thyself, in terms of that statement. So an experience in 13, tahus, it's going to be takus, not the but takus, reflection, inside outward, and tabruz, projection. Although it may appear to be outside or projected outward, or seem to originate from outside their mind on its own. And the ka'a spirit or ka'a'u spirits within are doing the work of deception. So when we talk about spiritual ignorance and racial blindness, in particular, when we're dealing with the spell and some aspects of the spell, the issue is for us is that there are a number of things happening within the human body. There are a number of influences happening within the human body, and bad information and poor interpretation means that as human beings we think it's all us. Because it's being generated from within us, we think it's all us, not understanding to some degree that we are a universe, and within a universe contains many different life forms, many different types of objects, different types of energies, etc. And so we have to understand who and what we are in order to know what is taking place, because it's not to say that we're not taking ownership for the things that we do and ownership for our actions and so on and so forth, and how we feel and all those different types of things, or whatever the case may be. But we can be influenced by external things. Advertising, the whole Western world works on the influence of advertising and what we see in movies and different types of things, etc. Yes? And what we're into, what we're not into, what we like, don't like, who we don't like, who we're afraid of, who we're not afraid of. One of the problems that we face today with the cancer of racism is because of what's been done through the movies and through the television and through the media, affecting, forming, not stereotypes, because stereotypes is two, correct? Monotypes, the way people see certain things. How we're being programmed, how we can be programmed, as you can see, programmed by light and sound energy. How light and sound energy affects not only the brain, but it affects cells. It can affect DNA, what we're taking in. Now, did we understand that when we was planted in front of the television for years as a kid? Did our parents understand that when they planted us in front of the television? Did we understand it when we bought the television? When we were at the movies? Remember the word movie? Move, to move you emotionally. Did we understand these things? To have the necessary controls in place to protect us from the influencing factors, i.e., yes, I like that, I'm happy with that, no detriment, I'll let that one in. Understood? But, or is it a case of, we're letting it in ignorance, and then movies, sound, all these things are full of subliminal messages, full of hidden trickery which we're not necessarily paying attention to. So the stuff that we're consciously aware of, what about the stuff that we're unconsciously aware of that still gets stored in the subconscious mind? Now we're starting to get an insight into how this world works. Now there is a poll. I don't think there's that many questions actually, so let's see if we've in fact we can't do it just like this class in the next one. So you're lucky you get away with that because it's in the other presentation. I didn't move it across, so you get lucky for your recap. We'll move on. Any questions from the chat or someone wants to ask verbally?
Yes, there's a question here from Claudette. She asks, we were taught that we were given the soul, but now that we know the creation in Genesis was about the Adamites, can you explain how we got the soul? And also, if you could just clarify who the Adamites are for those who are unfamiliar with the terminology.
Right. That's a okay. Let's see how to answer this best. In fact, let's go back. First of all, the biblical understanding at one time, obviously, remember we went through various different schools. So at one time, obviously, the biblical understanding, as we were going through those schools, that was the truth being taught to you at that time. And the alchemist, which the master teacher is, he was taking that which was bad information, and converting it into good information, in a sense, to produce light knowledge that would be useful for us at that time. But remember, he always said, I came giving you what you want, so you would learn to want what I really came to give. So at that time, when he was teaching Wu-Sabat or right knowledge or Wunawap in the 60s, it was too heavy for the people at that time. And so therefore, we wanted religion, we wanted to believe, we wanted to the Bible, Quran, and we wanted to know that information, hence why it was necessary to spend so much time going through the various different religious degrees. Now, he's explained that he never intended to spend so much time in those degrees, but little by little, if you go back and look at those books, you'll see that you were being given Wu-Sabat, you were being given ancient Egypt in those times, certainly. And if you look at the Supreme Mathematics series, you see in those scrolls that featuring heavily. So it was always walking you back away from that as the source of who we are. Because remember, we understood that even in that biblical understanding, it didn't start there, because the question was always, well, where did Cain's wife come from if Adam and Eve were only the two people on the planet Earth? So walking that back, that was a beginning in his story, as opposed to the very, very beginning of things. So now you have to understand that history as it was given, or that biblical history, is simply talking about the creation of the white race 6,000 years ago. Yeah, because the word Adam from the word Edom, it means red or ruddy. So it's speaking about the creation of the white race, even though, as I say, the stories within it are fictional and many of it is copied from the Sumerian tablets, understood. So when you're asking, as I say, where is the soul coming from, for you to do more research, it's good for you to probably go to Holy Tablets, chapter 7, tablet 4, understood? And then bring that, what is being expressed in there, up to date. So when we're talking about our soul, we are expressing the fact that we're looking at a projection of an aspect of ourself from the mental downwards, understood? And when it's perceived on the fourth plane of existence, it appears as soul. And we have two, as I say, we have the Rawu soul, yeah, and the Ba'ah, the Rawa soul, and the Ba'ah soul. So the creative expression of being, as you see there, and the breath of life. So we breathe in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide, understood? And refer to the breath book or breath skull for that. But that's firing up our solar plexus. So that's our kind of physical soul. But the real us, or the real you, so to speak, is this energy aspect, the soul force, that creational expression being that works in conjunction with the achach, understood? Yeah, the etheric being, understood, and the ka'ah, yeah, the spirit. We some say spirit, but it's really the exoplasmic being, understood, projected down from this over being. So an aspect of your mind, as I say, is projected down, understood? And as I say, it's being called what you're calling soul, and it allows us to connect with our ancestors called the Parnatharu, and Wu-Sabat is the spiritual science which has been broadcast on a frequency within the universe. The reason why a person can lose or gain the soul, lose and gain, because it's talking about really our connection to our ancestors and the very source of things. And what happens is that when a person becomes addicted to anything where they're not in control of self, so if a person drinks too much or they consume too much alcohol and then they are not in control, persons on drugs, not in control, understood? Person, I don't know, sometimes you can be overly angry or whatever. If you're not in control of self, or you're addicted, or the physical body is desiring something and you're not really making the decisions, it's because of an addiction, so on and so forth. You lose that connection because you're not in control. So that's why the soul can be regained and gained, because it's that connection. Now, in that biblical story, it says that, well, the Lord God breathed into man and man became a living soul, understood? In that regard. So really what you're talking about there, if you had to make a comparative study of what's being expressed, because the breath was involved, they're talking about the rawah, yeah, the breath of the living being, understood? But in that example, it's really what it's saying is the Lord gave, a man became a living soul. You can't become living as soul until you die. So the physical would have to expire, and then the aspect of the being, the source of who you are, the energy of who you are, then obviously is able to express itself. Like when we are sleeping in the sun, we start to exist as a mental being and as an etheric being. Yeah, but this soul, as I say, is an aspect of our mental being projected down, interpreting as soul, and it comes, as I say, from our ancestors. We are their children, and as I say, the aspect of the mind that we are calling mental on this plane was created by them for this form of existence. You understand? So again, as we look at the structure of our mind and how it connects to the mental, how we receive information, and how that connects to the multiverse, understood? Well, you can see here that we are all of this. So we are connected to it outside of ourselves, and our ka'at, or spirit, enables us to have a channel directly into the mental, which we draw down from, and how we receive our thoughts, how we connect into the mental reservoir. But we are also all of this. We are a universe. Universe means diverse energy into one form. So we are a universe, which obviously is a reflection of the multiverse. So the singular is connected to the multiple. So we are connected to the Parnatharu as their children, understood? And there's an ascension pathway for us, because as we spoke about, I think in a previous class, maybe rebirth of Black Egypt and the matriarch, I think we went through some detail about an incident happened around about 9 billion years ago, where basically group of our ancestors connected to the Sirius star constellation. We know Sirius star constellation is the border between the 18th and 19th galaxy. Had no longer need for the physical body and evolved to higher states of ether. Yes, but it was still connected because of race, was still connected to our people that were too physical, did not want to develop themselves spiritually, so on and so forth. So they cut off the link or the gateway to them by collapsing the sun, obviously, or in that tri-solar system referred to as Sirius C today. And so that cut that connection. So in order to still provide a method or a way for us to connect, an ascension pathway, as I say, had to be created in order to reconnect with them. Understood? And as you are aware, they will only descend down to the 4th level of existence. They won't come down any lower than that. We have to, as I say, evolve up to that level in order to meet. Understood? And so that means developing our internal faculties as a result. So your soul is a part of that, a projection of the mental downwards. So nothing to do with the biblical understanding. And if it was, that would, from a comparative study point of view, that would deal with the rawah soul, which is connected to the breath as opposed to the Ba'h. I hope that answers your question. If not, please question further. Any other questions?
There are no further questions.
No further questions.
Okay, so moving on. So we understand about the holographic brain. Understand, a quick whistle stop there, but do some more research on holograms to understand how your brain works. We are looking, so you can't see me on screen, but we're looking inwardly, we're not looking outwardly. We are projecting outwardly what we have seen or picked up externally. Now, so when we understand, we understand, go a bit deeper into existence. Let me see what time I've got. So I cannot be over time today. Okay, so got about an hour. So, right. So whistle stop tour. So some of you may have seen before, they call it the SMAT circle, the wheel of space or clock of space, time and matter. We talked about that earlier as it relates to existence. And you see 9 at the top and 3 at the bottom, so, and then 6 in the center. So quickly, I've got to go through this a bit quickly. If we have more time, I'd go through more detail. So 9 ether represents all existing, all gases, all the combination of all existing gases, all energy within existence. It can't get more powerful than 9 ether. Understood? But when 9 ether grows old, so 9 ether is ether in its youth, strength, and old age. When 9 ether gets old, it produces 6 ether. You understand? So this is less potent gases in the formula. And when 6 ether dies, it produces 3 ether or ghost. You understand? So to go around this clock or circle one time takes 72 million years. So if you add up the numbers, they've removed the 2 and the 1 for better understanding, then for the system to work. And basically, as I say, it takes 72 million years to go through this existence. So the universe and other forms of existence in that regard, that in how certain life forms, has its own summer, winter, spring, autumn, so on and so forth. Yes. So where its energy is at its, I suppose, highest point, or the universe is kicking out energy at its highest point, then over time and age it has to rest. You understand? And in that resting, lower types of energy are produced, or less potent energy is produced. Now 6 ether or death forces came to this planet around about 17,250,000 years ago. Some round it up to 18 million years. Now prior to that, those death or decaying forces were not part of the planetary existence here. So death and decay is a thing that came along afterwards. So obviously we lived a lot longer, so on and so forth. Yeah, in terms of the life forms that were here in that regard. Now, this goes for a certain journey. So if you look at this was asking about the loss of soul, well, it's loss of soul, but how about soul. And I suppose if you look at coal over time becomes diamonds, correct? So what happens is that you think about it, it's the blackness represents energy, that state, yes, where it's an abundance of energy. Yeah, the darker the skin, the higher the vibration. Do you understand? So the higher the vibration, so the more energy contained within it. Because remember, as you're starting to slow down in vibration, you think about those moving particles when we're looking at the light spectrum. Remember, the first stage before it goes into the part that we can't see, isn't it? They call it ultraviolet. So the first stage is violet. Understood? Yeah, so that purpley type color before it goes into the blacks, which you can't see, the energy is still there. So as it's slowing down in vibration, obviously it goes all the way down to red, which is the slowest in color. Now, when we're looking at this type of situation here, 9 ether would represent that coal, that blackness. And coal in terms of its makeup is fairly brittle. Do you understand? Meaning that it can crumble or whatever quite easily. So it's less dense. You think about higher forms of vibration. So you think about ice. Ice is lower form, you know what I mean, where the molecules are moving more slowly. It's very solid, isn't it? The more energy you put into it and the molecules start to move and vibrate, it turns into water, yeah, a liquid. When you vibrate, I mean, add heat to it, etc., again, the molecules move faster, and then those bonds break, it becomes steam. You understand? So steam having the most energy, but yet in that regard, but it's much more fluid, it's much more dense. Less dense, excuse me. So, and this is where you're going up in energy, or energy being applied. Whereas you think about this, the diamond is one of the hardest, if not the hardest mineral on the planet. Understood? And it's transparent. So over time, yes, the energy is what? Lost. Now, soul is associated with energy. Yes, the Rawu aspect of the soul is resulting in motion. You understand? Or energy in motion, called emotions. Which is the source of it, is the soul. So here you can see we're going around that circle all the way down from 9 to 3. There's no more sun heat genes left in the formula. Understood? Yeah, it produces transparency or ghost. Yeah, ghost energy. Now, interesting enough, when we're born, or as Nagari, when we're born, you can see we tend to be born when we come out, obviously we come out of the waters, and we're of a lighter hue, aren't we? We tend to be born light. Now, some people that makes them happy. Do you know what I mean? Other people, it is what it is. You understand what I'm saying? So colorism, people are, oh, the baby's light, and so seem to be happy about that. This is colorism disease that we've been endowed with, some people anyway. But if you notice our hair texture when we come out of the womb, it's not even hair yet, it's fur. Understood? So this straight texture, when we see it on animals, we say, oh, that's fur. So we see it on bears, we see it on dogs, we see it on all kind of animals, we say that's fur. When it's on top of human beings' heads, we say that is hair. It is not hair if it is straight. You wear your hair however you want to wear your hair. So this is not an attack against people who straighten their hair, so on and so forth. Wear what you makes you feel beautiful, but we're just calling it how it is. So when we see it on other races who have that texture, it is fur. The same way men who've got a beard, that is fur. Hair on the chest, that is fur. Hair on the back, hair on the legs, that is fur. It is not hair. Hair's on the head. There's only one people on the planet who have hair. Yes? So remember, as our genes get stronger, yeah, and our pigment starts to take more form, yes, and we're vibrating higher, yeah, it gets stronger. As we get older, this beautiful little baby, well, both beautiful, but beautiful little baby to the right, yes, we see, yes, she has beautiful hair, not fur, as our genes become stronger and we get darker. And so we're generating internal sun, but also taking in the external sun. Understood? As we become more energetic, we become stronger, become darker, so on and so forth. Understood? So if you look at it, really, this is almost in reverse of what you're seeing. Excuse me, when we're born, obviously because we were in the waters for a certain period of time, and we didn't need to have hair in that regard. Now, obviously, when what they don't tell you because of racism and the disease of racism in society is that when the sperm and the ovum come together and the newly formed cell, which is going to grow into a baby, starts dividing into multiple cells, and it pins itself excuse me, within the womb, on the wall of the womb of the woman, simplistically expressing it. There are three particular layers that are formed, and this is the ectoderm, the mesoderm, and the endoderm. And what they don't teach is that there is a presence, particularly in at this stage, of black pigmented cells. Black pigmented cells, yeah, at this stage. And basically, it's important, specifically in the ectoderm, that these cells go on to form the brain, spinal column, and other related elements. So the amount of melanin, or these black pigmented cells that are there, has a direct correlation to one's brain capacity and direct correlation to one's brain power. All relating back to all of this, which was energy. And remember, we talked about this, I think it was in the last class, about that perfect number, isn't it, 1,000, and how we represented, the Nagaru represented 999 out of 1,000, the Dravidian represented 666 out of 1,000, and the Caucasian represented 333. And that's expressed in the color of the skin, because as it goes through, as I say, over time and age, you become weaker. You understand? Yes. So, and remember, we're born pure, and over time, you understand, we deteriorate in this particular life form. But not to go off the subject, the melanin and how much you have understood relates or directly affects, not indirectly, directly affects your brain capacity, brain function. Understood? From the very beginning of how we're being formed. Understood? Don't believe us, go and check it out. This is a diagram showing you the different presence of these cells and the importance of what is taking place in the darkness. Why it's important. See, many of us, you understand, many of us had children unexpectedly. Many children are born out of lust. You understand? I'm not applying some religious thinking against that. I'm just saying with the reality of what it is. You understand? So a lot of babies end up, well, we'll figure it out. You understand? As opposed to sitting down with your significant other and planning all the various different stages, yeah, to optimize what is taking place. So if you understood better, well, I need to take this at this particular time. I need to make sure, I mean, if you're a man, for example, and you're planning with your partner, whatever, actually, it's very important that, you know what I mean, the woman, sacred feminine, is not stressed during certain stages of the pregnancy, or at all, if it's good. But that doesn't mean not being stressed. It means you're going to sit there eating Haagen-Dazs and watching Netflix for 9 months. It means that certain activities that are being done whilst you're carrying the child affect, you understand, brain development and so on and so forth. So, and basically, because it's a copy of you, if you're doing, I don't know, you might not be a clever person per se, or you might perceive yoururself to be clever, but if you're doing Sudoku puzzles all the way through your pregnancy, for example, you're gonna produce a very intelligent child, at least who's clever with numbers, because that's what you were doing at the time whilst you were pregnant. So it has an impact on the development of the child, you understand? So yes, rest, no stress, but it doesn't mean you can't, you know what I mean, become a vegetable for 9 months, even though it's difficult. You may sometimes at certain times feel that way. So the point is that our understanding of what is taking place in the darkness, or planning ahead of how it's going to take place, means that we can optimize better what the outcome is going to be, rather than this kind of notion of not understanding, or us being ignorant about it, and things are left to chance. You understand? Well, it's not left to chance. These designs are going to happen regardless, and they're going to be reacting to things taking place internally and also things taking place externally. Understood? So ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. You can see these three cellular layers, yes, are absolutely key to human development, you understand, or us having the ability to form healthy children. The ectoderm, as you can see here, directly understood, is effectively related, to the development of here cerebral cortex, retina, the brain, understood, cerebellum, the medulla oblongata, understood, yes, spinal cord. How come they didn't teach us this, man? How come they didn't teach us this? Because they don't have the black pigmented cells in the abundance that we have them. So this is what I'm saying. Racism is hatred. Racism is hatred. It is a cancer to human development. An absolute cancer. Yeah, and it has hindered our development, the way the Mukasu have behaved over the last 6,000 years of where we're supposed to be. Master Secrets #1 tells you that. That Project 24, which your brother asked earlier about, was supposed to come with certain developmental tests, yeah, to show and cause us to evolve as children of the Panadaru. We're supposed to have already mastered things like time travel. Understood? Mastered beyond 99 elements on the periodic table. Understood about life after death and how to beat death. Death is a disease that can be cured. Telepathy. These are things that we're supposed to have mastered. But somebody has been riding us for the last 6,000 years and then kidnapped us for the last 400 or whatever. So interfering with our development. Had they just left us alone would be cool. They needed help for something. You know how we do. We will help. We might not sacrifice everything, but we will help. Maybe to our own detriment, as it causes in this particular situation. And still helping. Still carrying people over our shoulders when they were showing hate for us in those recent demonstrations. That's because of our soul. Whereas if it was the other way around, you can guarantee they probably would have kicked, you understand, our head in until we stopped breathing. And then get mad when people call them names. Yeah, mad when they keep doing the same things. So is that your nature? Is that your nature? Is that why you're doing it? Is it what your God told you to do? For those who believe religiously. Because they say God is love, but when you read their Bible, yes, and those who even believe religiously today, it seems to be a lot of war in there, a lot of bloodshed for these belief systems. Now, so one of the challenges is that basically we see that different so ancestral worship, or us feeding the forces, has always been a central part of our culture. Understood? But obviously they've made it negative adversely because it's been associated with false narratives and false stereotypes, with certain lower false practices, which in fact have been birthed out of the monotheistic religion, sacrificing innocent animals and blood sacrifices, so on and so forth. You see this all throughout the Torah, all throughout the Bible, and as I say, the Quran. Excuse me. Same thing, letting of blood, understood? But yet they point to, I don't know, a religion like Santeria, for example, and point the finger and say, hey, those are savages. Those are savages because they are sacrificing chickens and so on and so forth. So what is halal? I mean, what is the process of halal? What is the process of koshering meat? What is the process, obviously, all the way through the Levitical priests when they're putting meat on the altar and burn it for their gods to smell? Now, none of that's got to do with our way in which we did things in ancient Egypt, because basically our ancestors are the sun. Yeah, and so do not require any sacrifices because suns are self-generated. They generate 9 ether and were birthed from 9 ether. They don't require a person to put blood on an altar to be empowered. That's lower life forms. They require that type of energy. That's how you know it is there. So there's 2 central forces. However, we are connected to and are responsible for helping our ancestors transition. We are both etheric, yeah, spiritual, and we are also physical. And we are interconnected by race to our etheric ancestors, yeah, which in the Sabat language are referred to as Muslafu or Salafu. So, what is the issue now? So, when we understand this circle, we see basically that the forces of 9 ether, as we go through these various different transitions through evolution and then revolution, the clock or the wheel of time and existence should be moving in a what? Anti-clockwise direction, because the clock, or what you're calling clockwise, is going against, isn't it? If the sun, it rises in the east, which is only happens to somebody appearing on Earth standing, so that it is an illusion to a degree. So basically, but it moves from east to west. So the real time is going anti-clockwise. It's not going clockwise, yeah, because the sun is going from east to west. It's not going from west to east, which would be clockwise. It's going anti-clockwise. So there are forces that seek to reverse the natural motion and go against 9 ether, understood? To create chaos and a 6 ether environment that supports chaos and provides energy and life to these lower life forms. So when you look at the bottom of the circle where ghost is created, you see the other numbers there, isn't it? 2, 1, and 0. So at this point, we're talking about what? Discarnate entities. So low energy life forms that don't have a physical body or structure. Understood? What you're calling spirits, ghosts, spectres, and all these different other types of names or whatever. So discarnate energy, because energy can't be destroyed, only changed in polarity. So we're too material to make it out of this plane, therefore are trapped here or have come here, which we get time to talk about a bit later. So 3, 2, 1, obviously here, and then, as I say, down to the 0. So below this circle, this was what referred to as the lower cipher. Lower cipher, or Lucifer, Lu meaning primitive. The lower cipher. Now, how do you get that change there in circle? Because those of us in the physical, by our wishes, desires, understood? When we have them, those wishes and desires and different things, we open up ourselves, because if it's not targeted, We open up ourselves to becoming a wanted. We open up ourselves to becoming a source of force of energy that can attract forces, understood, that then will start to fulfill those desires, start to fulfill those wishes. And if unchecked, anything can appear, basically, because when you charge a thought or you put that desire out there, you charge that thought form, and it gives it energy, and it causes things to be attracted to it, understood, which includes these lower discarnate life forms. So we pull them up from this lower end by way of our desires and wishes. If you noticed in the affirmation, it said, I can be all that I want, not wish, all that I want in all, as long as my want is to stay in all, or the all expanding. Well, why would it just be that singular want? Because when one is reaching this state of perfection, or striving for this state of perfection, you can't have any other desires. You can't be in need, be opened up to be manipulated. Because any one of these forms can appear what your desire might be. Change in form and appear in your mind or your vision to appear to be a certain type of thing. And what obviously reflection and projection is explaining to us is that spirits internally can take these forms, read these things, and obviously manipulate human beings' minds to do things that empower 64 forces. And so we give them life, we give them form by bringing them up as a conduit to these lower life forms. Remember, Master taught years ago in religion, he said, God can't be God. Sorry, God can never be in need. Because as soon as God is in need, God is no longer God. Now, when we overlay that, so we drop the religious terminology and bring it up to today, we as a people, as supreme beings, that's what we are, understood. When we come in need, we become open. As we've just been expressing here, need creates it. And what happens is, if the reason why we were taught through and still being taught through the Masonic schools and so on and so forth is to be your brother's keeper, be your sister's keeper, live for and by one another, understood, is because when that happens and we're in that environment, you don't have need of anybody else. You're self-sufficient. Lower forces can't come in to satisfy that need and then manipulate the situation. Put themselves between you and nature. Nature provides. So you think about what they've done in this society, isn't it? We need water. But somebody has put themselves between us and getting to that water, and charge you for the privilege. So that puts us in need. Yeah, we're not drilling down and most people's houses, well, you're going to the water table and then drawing water up. So you got a well, you're tapping right into nature. No, you're getting your water through a pipe or a tap, which is controlled by some company or entity that wants to charge you, not only for taking water out of the tap, but they even charge you, even these days, certainly in England, they charge you for rainwater if you live in a house that goes through your gutters and drains into the drain. You get charged for that. So we're constantly placed in a situation that's where you have to go to them, or you're putting ourselves in need. Which is why they keep saying, for and by each other, for each other. Have your own stuff. Own. You can hear it in the background. Because you're not in need. You don't need to drop down to the lower forces for that need to be fulfilled by anyone. We can stay at those higher levels of vibration, 9, 8, and 7 ether. Never coming down. The moment we have to come down, then it becomes a problem. We become open, isn't it? The bank doesn't want to lend you money when you're in need. That's why we can take out a loan. They say, how much would you like to borrow? Don't how much you need. They say, how much you like to borrow. Yeah, because it wants to lend money to people who already got money. Because that's less risky, as they put it, risk. The sure thing. Providers. That they manipulate our words, you understand, in our culture. So the reality of the situation is that we didn't understand that how much power is in our thoughts and how it has to be, obviously, there's some element of control which is needed there, which is why we understand from the Holy Tablets until now, in the cycles part of actual facts, that the planet was quarantined because of thinking, our thinking, adverse thinking, because of the power of thought. And so here we pull them up from this lower cycle, or the lower cipher, or the loose cipher, obviously, which is to say, brings chaos into the physical world. Understood? Yeah, this is ontological teachings, yeah, from one of the actual facts, ontology of time. Now, as I say, you can see these lower abodes here, dead demon, dead moon. Yeah, so again, dead moon, no life is so lower entities, yeah, lower ether abodes. And so obviously trying to seek in there to change the direction or the motion of the circle. Yeah, and in a certain time where now obviously 6 ether, at least on this planet, is dominating, but it's starting to change, isn't it? We're getting a reversal in these forces as 9 ether is starting to come back to power. Yeah, again. And as we can see here at the top, you see now the force of 9 ether, the feminine force of 9 ether, obviously coming in to reverse that circle, isn't it? Reverse it back around so it's moving in an anti-clockwise direction. It's an interesting film. I think it's called The Devil's Advocate, isn't it? And when you look at the movie, if you watch that movie, there's a speech by the actor Al Pacino at the end, who's playing the devil at the end of the movie. And it's interesting when you look at the speech because he talks to you about this same type of thing. You understand? About, yeah, what you do, you plug up human beings, you pump up their desires, their emotions, whatever. And I think it talks about that, create this character called Ezzy Barzu. You understand? Overeating, lustful, greedy, you understand? You pump them full of these things so they become these consumers. And he says, all the while, who's taking care of the planet? Yeah, so they're making us follow them to be unworthy of being the gatekeepers of the planet so others can take control of it. Yeah, and you become food for the gods. So understanding these spiritual, the spiritual makeup or the makeup of what is taking place is crucially important. Yeah, because we are being hit by invisible adverse forces. And our ignorance has meant that, as I say, we are not doing all that we could do or all that we are powerful enough to do to reverse not only self, but the environment that we're in. Yeah, and this is why, through our ignorance, people are able to take control. So understanding on that wheel of space, matter, and time, that the below the free, below ghost, is to say these lower discarnate entities, which we can pull up or pull through into the physical by way of our mind. Yeah, and I think not to equate the doctrine to movies, but I think if you watch the first Matrix, that was a similar thing that happened, wasn't it? Where the Agent Smith or whatever in the movie was able to jump into the physical world by housing, you understand, one of the crew members or whatever on the craft, and then the man died. It's called pure chaos, mash up the ship and all that kind of stuff. And this is what is taking place here. Yeah, those forces that basically want to enter into this world because they don't have a carnal body, but they still have the desires. So imagine you're thirsty, but you don't have a mouth to drink or a body to drink. Imagine feeling hunger, and these things able to multiply energy, your lustful, whatever the case may be. You're going to do anything to in-house a person who has a carnal body, so you can take it over, even if it's for a moment, to feel, to satisfy that desire. Understood? Yeah. So everything on above the circle, on the top half of the circle, is alive. Everything on the bottom half of the circle is dead. Yeah, remember we saw that mind and sex, yeah, earlier. So top half of the circle, everything's alive. Bottom half of the circle, everything is dead. Yes, so this is what we're looking at here. So you understand, as I say, that even our skin tone and skin color, come back to that just for a moment, at our strongest point, yes, look what it's saying here. So in fact, your skin Lawan color is dictated from your Yachasat genes, from your outformational ancestors into your information present being. So through that DNA and RNA, which we were talking about earlier, and then earlier than that, you go to TNA, ferronucleic acid. Obviously for the hominids, that was directly communication from our ancestors to inform how we were to develop. Yeah, so we're looking at how that connective forces work. And in order to receive assistance and help, we have to respect that connection. We've been ignoring it. You understand? For other belief systems that we've been presented with, they've got nothing to do with our reality. Understood? But here you see that vibrational energy, or our ability to connect, is because we have a high vibrational rate because of how dark we are in comparison to others. Our darkness, which we've been ridiculed for, you understand, denotes a lot of energy. Yes, we are, and that, which gets misinterpreted in this society, isn't it? They don't want to see you express yourself. You know, really. Yeah, you hold it down in your workplace. We are expressive, not aggressive, because we have a lot of energy. Yeah, that's what our soul is, isn't it? It's the expressive aspect of us. So we're expressive. We use our hands. We're making a point. There's not energy behind it. It's not this dull tone, generally speaking, and people get afraid of that. Yeah, but if you understand the cultural norms for us, isn't it? People playing dominoes, or they're having a conversation in the park. You know, back in the day, for those of you who remember, you only had one television. Yeah, you used to hate when your parents' friends come around because you can't hear the television. Everybody's talking too loud. It's hard to watch James Bond when family are around because you can't hear the television, because everybody's loud. They're expressing themselves. That's how it is. Normal. Grew up in a lot of households like that. You understand? Who are functioning normally. So this is how it is. We got a lot of energy. Now, the interesting thing about it, which we have to understand, is that we are, we generate internal electricity. So we are bioelectrical individuals. And one of the ways in which we receive our powers, obviously through the sun, coming through our eyes, iris, which is a form of solar energy. Now, this is explained as a very important point. Excuse me. It says here, melanin conducts electrical fields. Yeah, so not just electricity, but electrical fields. High electrical conductivity in melanin. So we know melanin is a superconductor of electricity. Understood? It can achieve conductivity up to 1 ohm per centimeter. It is high electromagnetic fields by which Panatharu reaches out to you, and your lower fields, your Salafu ancestors of your genes call out to you. It's all about tones, vibrations, frequency, linked to your melanin and the female's mitochondrial DNA. So again, this generation of different types of energy allows communication, as we said, in what we just previously expressed, through ancestors and into our Natharu. And so I'm going to explore this more as we go further into this class here. So, what time we got here? Okay, 10 minutes past. It's got about 15 minutes left. So are we dead or alive? Well, the question is that basically when you're born, you are destined to die. So our ancestors see this realm where they are living as soul, and because it's eternal, and when we're born into this world, it's temporary, understood. They see this as death, and where they are as living. And when a person experiences a near-death experience, because they talk about here, when you're born, the life of light is cut on, because basically a burning process starts with breathing out, as I say, or processing air. And so, but when that burning stops, that burning of light or interpretation of life is over, isn't it? So basically, the physical body is returning to the flesh, to the ground, excuse me, and then, you know, that which was in us, the energy aspects of us, if they were developed enough to be strong enough to exist on their own, will then still maintain. So there's existence after death as opposed to life after death. But where they are, they consider this death and where they are life, you understand, in terms of the reverse to how we see it, you understand. And so we talked about this earlier. Remember, living as soul, for somebody who needed a comparative biblical reference. Yes, because when you die, then you're reborn as soul. When you die, that's when you live as soul, or man became a living soul, in Genesis 2, chapter 2, verse 7. Yes, but obviously when you're born into the flesh, there are a number of compromises that you got to deal with, which, you know what I mean, are not there as a spirit or as soul, which in-houses the spirit in-houses the soul. So, soul in-houses the spirit. The spirit in-houses soul. Yeah, that's correct. Spirit in-houses the soul. So basically, those compromises are not there that you got to deal with in the flesh. These desires and so on and so forth. These issues that arise as a result of that. So here we look at evolution and revolution here, east and west. And so the lower part of the circle we talked about was to show the differentiation between this, the spiritual world and the physical world, or certainly that lower aspect of the spiritual world, which is seeking to have influence. Not it does, but it's seeking to have influence on us here physically. Remember that science of religion that we talked about earlier. But you see on the 9 side, we get this revolving, isn't it, of the circle in an anti-clockwise direction. And then when we look at the Mukasu side, or the 6 ether side, they're seeking to reverse that in the opposite direction. So the force of 9 ether, or that outformation, came down. So the master teacher being one of the significant factors in bringing this new cycle information to cause a reversal in the movement of the cycle, in line with natural nature doing its job also, to reverse the way things are going. So moving away from a self-destructive mentality as opposed to self-preservation. You understand? Because we're moving on a pathway of self-destruction if we carry on the way we're going on. So it's the past that we have to recorrect, because we're going back now, making changes, obviously, in our genetics, which is altering our behavior. By altering our behavior, changing our form, by way of better information, right knowledge, right wisdom, right understanding to an overstanding. Now, this is important. The reality of who we are, and it looks like based on timing today, I knew this was going to be a big subject today. We're probably going to have to do a special, the next class is going to have to continue as this one, because we're not going to do you like that. I'm going to make sure we cover this subject properly. Now, when you're looking at a human being, or excuse me, any questions first off? Any questions?
No questions.
And there are no questions here.
Right. So when you are looking at a human being, yes, you are looking at 30 personalities. Now, another two yous. The you are born, and then the you pretend to be. So there's this aspect of you that you show the outside world. And then there's the real you that only you know about. You understand? And the various different voices that you hear inside your head. Now, you are at the top of the pyramid, as you see from this diagram here. And there are 29 others in your 4 generations that can have an influence on how you, let's say, drive the car. So you're at the top of the pyramid, you're driving in a certain direction, etc. But there are all these different people who can have an influence on the direction of travel, if you let them. Yes? Now, the fact of the matter is, spiritual ignorance has meant either we've been ignoring these messages that we've, or influencing factors, or like most of us, we just didn't even know they were there, because no one taught us about who we are, what we really are, the value of what we are. So, first generation, all the way down to 4 generations, these 29 influencing factors. Now, they only influence, or say only influence, when the people are not alive. So, if your mother has passed, it can be 29 influencing factors from these various different ancestors. If your father's alive, it's 28. If your grandparents are alive, obviously so on and so forth. But if they're past, for example, the maximum it can be is 29, because you make it 30. That overstood. So what happens is, I'm just going to go back to this diagram for a second. Yeah, when you're in your mother's womb and you are basically through the placenta, you receive a transfer of blood, yeah, from your mother, obviously with all the various different nutrients that you need in order to grow and survive in the womb and live and grow, flourish, so on and so forth. But within the blood transfer which your mother is providing to you, as a characteristic of us obviously being human beings, is that you are transferring, because of the cells in the blood, the DNA from all of these 29 plus 1 individuals. Now, obviously, if your mother and father clearly were having sexual relations, then you have got your mother's ancestral setup of 30, including her, and your father's ancestral setup as 30. And if at that particular time they had interactions or relations, i.e. exchange fluids with anybody else, then that adds another 30. If when they were born and there was a snapshot of certain things taken, for example, I don't know, the uncle interacted with whatever, a great-grandfather interacted with somebody else or whatever at that time when the father, produced his father, so on and so forth, that adds another 30. So there are, because of interactions with other human beings, you've got multiple personalities in your bloodstream, yeah, referred to as DNA, RNA, various different types, these characteristics. These are the spirits in your blood. So forget about spook out there, ghost, this, that, whatever the case may be. You've got spirits in your blood, personalities in your blood. They've lived life, the same, because your DNA and RNA is recording everything, every waking moment of your existence, and it's recorded in each of your cells. Like an etheric memory bank. So you, as this innocent little baby, gets all of this transferred across into you. And it can take, looking at some of the rules around this in nature, it can take up to 7 years for a female to get rid of foreign DNA in her system. So she is the god or the goddess, you understand, of the planet Earth. And then as a result of that, in terms of producing life, she obviously stores life, yes, for a certain period, and optimizes her body in order to produce life or continue the production of life. Understood? So, like when you're putting something like earth is needed, obviously, to plant things for soil and water and other different things, etc. But the earth is needed for to produce life, as well as liquids. We need all those things, etc., to produce life, the various different elements. But the reality is the woman retains that memory bank. Now, obviously, sex was at one time considered sacred, meaning that it should be treated with the greatest care because of the problems that it can cause with things like genetic confusion. So a man goes out there, for example, and he sleeps with another woman, and then comes back, and he says he's got a partner at home. He then comes back, for example, and he sleeps with his wife or whatever. He brings the genes, if he's not waited a certain amount of time for this. I'm not going to give you that over this, but he comes back now and gives that and puts those foreign genes now into his missus. So the person who was against or would prefer his wife not to be around or prefer to be him, that personality now is now in his wife or partner, whatever the case would be. So another 30 gets added, including the woman who the man slept with. So what impact does that have then on the personality? Because there's somebody in there who basically would probably want to see you out the picture because they want your man. What happens? Does it create internal diseases, confusion, so on and so forth, thoughts that are not your own? You can see why certain rules had to be observed around how we're mixing, because you're bringing foreign entities or adverse forces into the system. So imagine the devastation of being raped by other races. Imagine the devastation of being raped. What happens certain times is that the purity of the sexual act, which whether human beings have lots of it or whatever the case may be, I'm not using it from a moral point of view, but human beings have a lot of it. It's still a sacred act in terms of it having a lot of consequences when it goes wrong or if it's misused. So rape is unnatural in nature, of course it is. So imagine now somebody puts their foreign genes and their perversions in a woman. It's mainly the case, isn't it? Or it could also be a man, but in a woman, for example. And then what happens a lot of the times is then the sacredness of the act then gets taken away. And let's say maybe that woman then, the reaction is to go and start sleeping with a lot of different men because it's been devalued, sex. The question is it her behavior or is it the rapist's perversions still expressing itself and the woman is interpreting it as her own thought still? Because she doesn't understand that person now, because of the exchange of fluids, is living inside of her. They don't teach that when they're providing counseling, for a simple understanding of who and the reality of who we are. So we didn't understand that 4 generations back, when the Makasu's in our genealogy, it's very hard to go against your oppressor and they're in your genes. Don't treat them like that. You know what I mean? Even though they did do the George Floyd situation, not all of them are bad. Who's that voice? The voice of the oppressor is in the genes, being programmed, expressed internally if we've got mixed genes in there, and also externally. Reflection and projection is inviting us to look at what is taking place internally by those spiritual forces. Who is triggering some of these thoughts we're thinking, and how do we regain control again? You hear me? simple when we know. But it took the master teacher to start expressing this information in a form that we can now start to take control of. But it all starts with this transfer in the main of, let's say, blood through to us as babies from our mother. And so if you don't think sex is sacred, watch Paternity Court or whatever it is on YouTube and see how sex is misused. Now, so it requires some level of control when we were in our right society, and this is why the zodiac signs is a nonsense really for us. I don't want to get too much into that star sign stuff in this class, but it's a nonsense because you got to take into account when all of these people were born. Understood? Yes, as well as there's a miscalculation in the calendar, which I even think there was an article this week, isn't it, exposing that about a 13th constellation, but that's another thing for another day. But you've got to take into account all these different personalities as well. I mean, when your mother and father was born, you're 1/3 them, 1/3 your mother and father, but then you've got to take into account who they interacted with that's influencing their 30. Understood? Yeah, so clearly this is what is taking place there and what we have to understand. And certain thoughts that are coming by way of us or through us internally, yes, if we're not in control, we're thinking it's our thoughts and we can act upon it. And they can range from all types of things, isn't it? Somebody's personal desire to want to be a footballer. You understand? And how strong it is, depending on where it is in the structure, it would only gain strength if by way of how we acknowledge it. So if we acknowledge it as our own thought, then this individual's here, I'm just giving this for example, this individual's thoughts, let's say he was at 30, and we acknowledged the thought that he expressed as our own thought, and we acted upon it. Then we bump him up to 29. Keep doing it, bump up to 28. Keep doing it, bumps up. Keep doing it. He can basically take over control of the driver's seat, and you are then suppressed. The real you is suppressed. Yes, happens in relationships all the time. Understood? Happens in relationships all the time, isn't it? So sometimes when we're thinking about these esoteric or spiritual things, we got to look. It's only going to be a mirror, isn't it, of what's taking place certain times in the physical. It's just that there's no physical body that we're talking about here, but the energy that sits behind it is still there. Yeah, so this is the reality of who we are, and these are spirits, for lack of a better word, or your ancestors having influencing factors on the decisions you're making. Understood? Now, on that note, I think that's a good place to stop because I've got to jump off to jump on another meeting at 4:30. So we'll leave you with that image, and what we'll do, even though it's not part of the advertised program, we'll change the advertised program because we need to finish off this section and then go into some understanding about the golden children and some understanding about a computer program called, well, I say it's not a computer program, it's a program, but it's like a computer program called Re Ha-Achet, and how it ties into the golden children and how it's necessary use to stop us from being used like an etheric battery when we die for lower forces, and how our mind and our aspects of our soul can get split down at the point of death and be used as an etheric battery for lower forces, where our ancestors are then trapped there. And now this program is needing to form this, well, as it describes it, gargantuan task of putting everything back so it's aligned where it's supposed to be. And then what is our role, or how are we connected to helping our ancestors when they do pass, transition to higher states of existence? So we need to cover that in a significant amount of detail, but we needed to spend some time setting the foundation, because obviously what we're dealing with when we step into this stuff is still rooting ourselves in factual information, spooks and spirits and so on and so forth. So on that basis, are there any burning questions before we close out today?
No, there's no questions on my part.
Okay.
And,
So no questions on the other side?
No.
Okay, so appreciate your patience. So what we do when we come back on the 2nd of August, we are going to continue with reflection and projection part 2, so we can bring it to a proper conclusion. I think the advertised class then was the real Trinity, so it will be reflection and projection part 3, if you want to call it that, and then we'll figure out whether we can do real Trinity in 1 class, or whether even this needs to go into 4 classes, because they're important. Yeah, reflection and projection. Okay, thank you everybody, much appreciated for joining us today. As I said, unfortunately I've got to rush off, so I can't do my usual overtime stuff. Please remember to take notes, because when we come back at the next thing, I'm going to be asking a few questions to see whether you remembered stuff before we go even deeper into this subject matter. Okay. Tawakum, that means thank you all in Zabek. Lehet wakut for your Lehet wakut Lehet wakut kum. Yeah, thank you for your time today. And yeah, we'll see you on the 2nd of August. Take care in whatever you're doing, and stay safe.